get after it again tomorrow night. CNN Tonight with Don Lemon starts right now.
Jake Tapper is much better looking than you, and you do like to hear yourself talk. I think they were looking at our text message there, because I say that to you all the time. I did.
Carry on.
I did. Great show. Thank you. Good seeing you. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. It is election night in America. On the most important primary night so far this year, the biggest races are in California, where the polls will close just about 1 hour from now, and CNN will be watching it for the next 4 hours for you. The results there in California will have a huge impact on whether the Democrats could retake the House in the 2018 midterms. And you're going to want to stay with us for all of those results, so make sure you stay right here. But first, I want to turn to the White House, the war on the NFL. President Trump threw himself a party today. After nobody else would come. In a classic example of taking his ball and going home, the president escalated his fight with the NFL by scrapping a planned White House visit by the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, after he learned an embarrassingly small number of players and coaches would actually attend, replacing it with what he called a celebration of our country on the South Lawn today. But disinviting the Eagles didn't mean there would be no protests.
Thank you very much, everybody.
The president ignoring shouted questions from reporters.
Mr. President, are you saying that the football players are not patriotic, sir? Is that what you're saying?
Will you meet with them, sir? Will you meet with the
athletes and talk to them?
So the White House calls all of this a political stunt, and they are absolutely right. This is a political stunt, not by the Philadelphia Eagles, by the President of the United States, the man who said this.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
Like I said, this was absolutely a political stunt by the president. A source close to the White House tells CNN that President Trump plans to continue to pound the NFL anthem issue through the midterms, continuing to trash players, mostly black players, for their protests over police abuse against people of color. So why is the president doubling down? Because he believes that it helps him with his base. A CNN poll after President Trump made that crude remark about the players, calling them SOBs, found 49% saying that pro athletes should be required to stand for the anthem. 47% said they should not be required to stand. That is well within the margin of error. So Americans are pretty much evenly divided on this issue. Rather than trying to find common ground, is more than willing to exploit that division because he believes it helps him politically. He's more than willing to ignore the facts, to ignore the truth if he thinks that helps him. But facts matter. So here are the facts. Not one single Eagles player took a knee during the regular season. Not one. Not one single Eagles player stayed in the locker room during the anthem. Not one. So who is being disrespectful here? Who is stomping all over the values we hold here as American? Values, the freedoms that American heroes have fought and died for. You know who's doing that? It's the person who's lying to you about the Eagles players. The person who's lied to you well over 3,000 times in the past 501 days. The person who is demanding forced patriotism, just as autocrats have done for centuries. That is none other than Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. Now I want to bring in CNN political analyst April Ryan, CNN political commentator Scott Jennings, and Republican strategist Will Wilson. Good evening to all of you. Welcome to the program. Rick, I'm going to begin with you. Sarah Sanders says that the Eagles, they're orchestrating a political stunt. But if you look at this in the big picture, the president lying about the Eagles taking a knee during the anthem, then Sarah Sanders attacking the team today, who is orchestrating a political stunt?
Listen, if I may quote Elf, Donald Trump sits on a throne of lies. These are people built a political show today in order to throw red meat out there in a little clash in the culture war so that Donald Trump could distract people from all the other things that are rising around him with Michael Cohen and with Paul Manafort and everything else. And you know, Sarah Sanders has become someone who stands at that podium every day and says one of two things. I refer you to outside counsel, or whatever other things that are coming out of moving are lies. And this was a outright lie. The Eagles players had not knelt on the field. They had not engaged in protests. And, you know, it should hopefully teach the NFL owners and a valuable lesson. They bent the knee from and cut their heads off. He still humiliated them. He still went after them. He still made characters in this political stunt that he and Sarah Sanders executed today.
April, so you asked Sarah Sanders if the president understands the reason some NFL players, and you also pointed out that none of the Eagles players decided to kneel. Watch this.
Is the president aware that this is about police-involved shootings and not about disrespecting the flag? Is the president aware of that, Sarah? Please. I understand you're going to Stephen, but I'm asking: there's an underlying issue, and it just keeps going about disrespect of the flag. Soldiers. There are black and brown soldiers that fight military well, who feel the need to bring attention to police-involved shootings is something. Is this what you do? Is the president aware that taking the knee is about police-involved shootings?
The president has made his position crystal clear, and that it's about. I let you rudely interrupt me and your colleague. I'm going to ask that you allow me to finish my answer. I would be happy to answer it if you would stop talking long enough to let me do that. The president has made his position crystal clear on this topic. He feels strongly that standing for our national anthem is something that we should do, something that matters to what makes our country special and unique and what sets us apart. He's not going to waver on that, and he's not going to apologize for it. And frankly, more than 70% of Americans agree with him on that matter. If you go back to what the original intent was, this has been made a political argument of which the president is not going to back down from, and he's been clear on it. Stephen, last question. April, I've addressed your question. I'm not going to continue to engage with you. Stephen.
The NFL is now telling people they have to stand. Will the president deal with the issue of police-involved shootings?
I'm going to deal with the issue of addressing your colleague's question.
But it's a real question. You take it to the president and come back to us with it.
Stephen, go ahead.
Well done, April. I wish there were more people in that room who would do that every single day. And you notice a guy after you said, I'm always happy to give my time to a colleague, which I thought was great. So, April, do you feel that this White House is purposely misconstruing the meaning of these protests? They're doing it on purpose?
Yes. Yes, I do. I've watched over this period of time that this president, these 501 days that this president has been in office. You have to remember, you know, he has said that it's disrespectful. And he's called out the NFL. The NFL is now doing the bidding of the president, basically saying that all the players must stand. But after that piece, what's next? They talk about they are the administration and the president for all America. Well, you have a segment of America that has created a fervor within not just the black community, but the brown community and other communities in the white community about what we're seeing, police-involved shootings, and they are not addressing it. I asked the president in October about this when he did his press conference in Rose Garden, Stacks to Mitch McConnell. He did not answer. He said it was about disrespect of the flag. But after you get through the disrespect and kneeling versus standing, you still have this issue. What are you going to do about it? You know, it's still a very big issue, and we're seeing it happen over and over again. And Don, not just a few weeks ago when we had the situation with a young man who was shot 20 times or more by police in his grandmother's backyard, and then we had the verdict come down about Alton Sterling. I mean, you know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said it was a local issue. So, and then we still have the issue of Eric Garner, who cried out 11 times, "I can't breathe" in New York. His mother's still looking for justice, and that's still in limbo. Well, there are issues on the table, and this White House is primed to be the one to answer it, and they have not answered it.
That is the big question. Why are they not worried or concerned about police brutality? They should be. I couldn't believe that she called you rude, because obviously, I mean, she hadn't seen Helen Thomas or Jake Tapper or Sam Donaldson. I mean, that's the way the briefings used to be all the time. That was a contentious adversarial relationship, and now everyone wants to be friends with him. Hang on, Scott, I'm going to get you in here, and I'm veering off a little bit. What happened to the press corps? Why don't they do that anymore? Why don't they do what you did today?
Don, I'm going to say this to you, and my fellow colleagues may get mad at me. I don't care. But here's the bottom line. I came into the White House when Helen Thomas was the dean of the White House Press Corps, working for UPI. Ann Compton was there. Sam Donaldson, Bill Plant, so many others were there who would press. They would bang on that door.
So why don't they
if the
do
door
it?
was locked. They would challenge them. You know what? And I'm going to say this, and I don't care if people are angry. I've been there 21 years to there too.
Okay, say
2
it.
days.
Say it,
Here's the
sister.
bottom line. Many of the people in that room want to be friends with these administration folks. Be it any administration, there is a friendly adversarial relationship, and they're scared that they will not get information or they'll be talked about. So what?
We're going to talk about that a little
It's
bit
about
later
the
in the
American
show.
public and giving
I'm glad you
information to
said
the
that.
American public.
We'll drill into
Yeah.
that a little bit more. I got to get Scott in.
It's the
Scott,
truth.
The White House says today's event was canceled because it expected low attendance. But the president tweeted this out today, saying staying in the locker room for the playing of our national anthem is as disrespectful to our country as kneeling. What does kneeling have to do with attendance?
Well, I think the reason they canceled the event, according to what I read from our own Caitlin Collins, was that the White House thought just a couple of days ago that some 80 Eagles were coming, coaches, players, trainers, others, and then at the last minute they were told fewer than 10 people were coming, and it was mostly coaches and trainers and very few players. And so I'm not sure the president had much of a choice but to cancel the event. How do you have a Super Bowl event with the players if there are no players? If this president knows how to do anything, it's produce a TV show. The cast of this particular show was the Eagles, and the cast wasn't going to show up. So I don't know if they had much of a choice once they found out of the low attendance. The president's views on this are well known. I happen to believe that the tension between the police in this country and the African American community is one of the most worrisome civil society problems we have. We cannot have huge swaths of our population that feel like they are being targeted by the people who are commissioned to keep us safe. It is not an acceptable condition. But the president, as Sarah said, has made his feelings on this national anthem issue known, and I'm sure he felt disrespected by the fact that he thought the Eagles were trying to pull one over on him by pulling out of their participation at the last minute. I think, frankly, Don, there is a way to look at this where everybody got what they wanted. The president politically got to inject the national anthem issue back into the bloodstream of our national conversation. And let's be honest, the Eagles players who want to draw attention to the racial injustice issues, which are real, look what we're talking about tonight. So there's a way to look at this where everybody got what they wanted here. Maybe in some way everybody's a winner from their own point of view.
Hey, Rick, I just quickly here, does it matter? What if just one player showed up? I mean, why would it matter? And you had a lot of people there already today. Why does it matter how many players show up?
Look, Donald Trump is about the spectacle. He is about the picture. He is about the frenzy of the visible. And so he would want that wall of players surrounding him. Because by some associative property, he feels like suddenly he's a Super Bowl player, and the picture is good, and the image is good. He didn't want to be standing there on stage with a half a dozen people who were incidental, trainers and coaches and not the stars of the team. But you have to ask yourself, why did they choose not to do this? And I think a lot of it came down to team solidarity. I think Scott's got a good point. I mean, I think these guys want to make that, the players want to make that clear that this is an issue that is not something that the president has tried to make it merely about the flag and the pledge and the anthem, but for them it is also about a peaceful civil protest and an expression of an issue that is incredibly tendentious and horrifying in this country. And it's something that the White House, President both sides, has not been hesitant to blow the dog whistle in this country a few times over the years. And it doesn't escape my attention that he's used every word but uppity to describe them. And there's been an incredibly charged atmosphere around this president on matters of race from the beginning. And this would be something where he could be mindful about it. He could acknowledge the issue that's underpinning it, but he won't. Because he wants the social warfare issue.
I'm going to keep you guys around. Stick around. We come back. President Trump demanding forced patriotism from the NFL. But is my way or the highway the American way? So as much as President Trump seems to hate the NFL, he loves NASCAR. Now, I wonder what the difference is between these two sports. Back with me now, for Ryan, Scott Jennings, and Rick Wilson. So, Scott, President Trump tweeted today, NASCAR and champion Martin Truex Jr. were recently at the White House. It was a great day for a great sport. So, just bluntly, Scott, because this is how we talk here. The president has said that this issue has nothing to do with race, but he frequently aligns himself with NASCAR, which is predominantly white. And anyone with two eyes can see that the NFL and the NBA are majority black. So how can the president claim otherwise?
Well, I think the president wants people to show up when they're invited. And I think that if the Eagles players had showed up to this event and not pulled out at the last minute, they would have had the event. Now, they could have made any statement they wanted.
Scott, I'm going to give you plenty of time. Just let me say this.
Let
me just say this. No, I'm going to let you finish. Hold on. I just want to
that
tell you the New England Patriots, not all of them showed up as well last year.
Than just a couple of water boys showed up. And that's what was about to happen with the Eagles. Literally, a couple of water boys were going to show up for this event.
Go on.
And so I guess from the president's perspective, why wouldn't you want the players to show up?
And there are reports that the Super Bowl MVP quarterback was going to show up.
Look, I had an event for George W. Bush in 2007 with World Series champion St. Louis Cardinals. You know who didn't show up? Albert Pujols, the most well-known player on the team. And we knew he was coming, and we went ahead and had the event, and it was fine because everybody else was there. So one or two guys could not show, and it's fine. But when the entire team boycotts, I don't know what kind of event you expect the president to have.
Okay, but not with just this event. But he's with the entire NFL and players or players who want to protest police brutality or want the criminal justice system fixed or criminal injustice system. So how can he claim otherwise? It's not just about this one event.
Look, I think the president, frankly, would be wise to take a step back here and realize what his administration is doing on criminal justice reform may be in some alignment with what some of these players want. I know they're feuding, and I know the president thinks it's helping him politically, but there's sometimes a way to zig when they think you're going to zag. I heard some conversation on this network tonight about the possibility of a broader conversation with some of these athletes. To me, that is the perfect pivot here. Let's take a deep breath. Let's stop feuding with each other, and let's talk about how we can advance our agendas where we can overlap. They're not going to agree on everything, but there's a way to move forward here.
That requires leadership. And it's hard to move forward when the president, you know it's a political strategy because he said, let's put this up. This is a very winning, strong issue for me. So everybody, you can't win this one. This one lifts me. This is from deposition from Colin Kaepernick about his grievance case against the NFL that this came out. Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones testified the president told him that. So, I mean, it's a political stunt to begin with, and to say that anything otherwise is just simply not. Speaking of political stunts, let's remember this. Vice President Pence flew April on taxpayer dollars, to Indianapolis. This was last season to attend the Colts and 49ers game. He and his wife left within minutes of arriving at the players during the national anthem, which is basically a quantity. At what point does this go too far?
Yeah. This whole thing has gone too far, John. It's just gone way too far because what it's doing is it's dividing the nation. And, you know, a president is considered a uniter. This is dividing the nation because the issue is shooting. The narrative has been taken about disrespect of the flag, a disrespect of the soldiers, and disrespect of the anthem. But listen to this. Not, you know, certain groups of people don't corner the market of being soldiers. You have white, black, Jew, Gentile, Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, transgender soldiers. You've got people who, in police, you've got people who are police. There is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And instead of just focusing in on this, they need to also deal with, yes, we respect and love our country, but there's also an issue. And I never forget talking to Martin Luther King III. He said President Trump wants to always give his father's book out, like give it to the Pope. He needs to read the book because he said if his father were alive, he believes he would be on the side of those taking the knee because Dr. King was someone who believed in making the comfortable uncomfortable and putting shining a bright light in dark spaces. And this issue with police involved shootings with black and brown America is still a dark spot in this. And Jim Johnson, the former head of Homeland Security in the Obama administration, said that when you have tensions between the community and police is a national security issue because both sides don't feel like they can trust one another. If you see something, say something. Who's going to say something? So it's got ramifications all over.
I want to get Rick in this last segment. So no, it's okay. So Sarah's passionate about it. Like that. Sarah's asked Rick today about how this compared to the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Baker who turned away a gay couple. I thought it was a fantastic way, which the White House came out in favor of, by the way. Watch this.
The president doesn't think that this is an issue simply of free speech. He thinks it's about respecting the men and women of our military. It's about respecting our national anthem, and it's about standing out of pride for that.
So why, Rick, support a Baker's right to free speech, but not the NFL players' right to free speech, to freedom of expression as they want to do during the anthem, and also free speech or expression not to show up at the White House if they don't want to?
Once again, Don, I've got to ascribe it to the White House dog whistle that Donald Trump has manned so assiduously in the course of his administration, where it's not a coincidence that this is an issue that affects African Americans. It's not a coincidence that there's a president who has not exactly hit the marks when it comes to being the president of every American. And you know, when you have the both sides issue hovering over this White House and it's never been resolved, not anywhere near anybody's satisfaction, you know, he's going to always be the gun on this. He's going to always have a deep suspicion by Americans broadly about his intentions for this. And this is obviously, by description now, by his own words, a stunt, a tactic, a play. And so I think that it's a very cynical one, and I think that, you know, he's cherry picking the rights and freedoms that certain people and certain races of people should have in this country. And we fought a war about that. So I think he's got to come to Jesus on this, but I doubt he'll ever heed the call.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Love the conversation. See you next time. And we come back, the former player in the Army Gray who convinced Colin Kaepernick to take a knee during the anthem, and a former Philadelphia Eagle. I'm going to ask them both what they think of the president's war with the NFL. We'll be right back. So the White House says the president is standing up for the national anthem by disinviting the Philadelphia Eagles, but not one player on the team took a knee last season. That's important to point out. So what is this really about? Let's discuss it now. Former Philadelphia Eagle Joe Kelly is here, player and Green Beret Nate Boyer. So good to have all of you on. Nate, thank you for your service straight out of the gate. And gentlemen, thank you both for coming on this evening. Joe, I'm going to start with you because you're a former Eagle. The White House says the Eagles decided to abandon their fans for a political stunt. So as a former player there, how would you respond to that?
I think once again the president has shown showing some of his bully tactics, as opposed to really understanding what guys have been trying to say for over a year, and he's once again changed the narrative and made it about the flag, made it about the anthem, made it about the disrespect for the military, the disrespect for the police, and I can guarantee you that there's not one player, current player, former player, that is disrespectful toward the military, that does not hate police. You know, I guarantee you 75% of the NFL players have relatives. My grandfather fought in World War I. So to make it that narrative, he's just trying to appease to his base. Yeah. You know, it's the same base. You know, like I said, these are the same guys who and people who still believe that Barack Obama wasn't born in America. Mm-hmm. So you know, the team wasn't going to show. Most of the team wasn't going to show anyway. But you know, as he did with the Apprentice show, he had to get in front of it, and he had to save face. A lot of rather than you know.
There are a lot of people, about half the country believe that the players should stand about, it's 49 to 47, and so that's well within the margin of error. So there are a lot of people who don't believe that Barack Obama was born in Africa. I mean, they actually believe, they know he was born here, and they don't believe that. Yeah. I mean, this is a contentious issue. But Nate, I have to ask you, because the White House keeps citing the national anthem, right, as this rift, and you are the one, by the way, none of them took a knee during the season. You were the one who convinced Colin Kaepernick to kneel rather than to sit while protesting during the national anthem. And I thought this was very impressive because you wrote a letter. You wrote a letter to Trump, Kaepernick, the NFL, and America. And in it, I thought it was fascinating. You said, I believe that progress and real change happens in this world when you reach across the divide, you build a bridge, you swallow your pride, you open your mind, you embrace what you don't understand, and ultimately you surrender. What do you think of all this going on? Because that is not happening right now. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, it's. I think you know, and I've said this before, it's extremely frustrating as a veteran, as a warfighter, no matter what war you fought in, or even if you were in a time of peace, to serve your country, especially overseas, though, and then come back to such a divided place where we're constantly hung up on these issues, and we get stuck on the details that aren't the real issues, and it just hurts, man. We still got men and women fighting over there. I've lost a lot of friends of mine, and many of them to their own hands back here, because, you know, maybe they're not getting the care that they need, and maybe it's just somewhat a product of the division and the hatred that's in our country. It's a virus, you know. It's really frustrating, and so that's what hurts more than anything, because you know, as a soldier, you know, part of what I did overseas was fight alongside people that had a different flag on their shoulder, that believed in a different God, and ultimately had many fundamental differences, but I had to respect them. I had to treat them a certain way and understand that they can still be my brothers in arms. We can still fight alongside one another for a common goal, and, you know, make progress and make change.
So,
and we're all capable of that back here too.
So I said this earlier to Chris when we were talking to each other on the air, Chris Cuomo. I said that Colin Kaepernick is, in a sense, compromised, because he was sitting. You had a conversation with him, convinced him otherwise. There was a compromise for him to take a knee, which people in the military understand, according to you as well. It's respectful to take. You do it for fallen soldiers. You do it on other occasions. It is a respectful act to do. Did you learn something in your exchange with Colin Kaepernick? Or do you believe it's disrespectful for people who want to kneel during the national anthem?
I personally don't believe that, but I also don't speak for the entire veteran community. There are many men and women that disagree with me, and that is also their right, and something that they fought for, and something that the flag and the anthem are supposed to stand for. Yeah. So personally, I thought what was important about that conversation, about that middle ground that we met on, was, you know, Colin straight up told me, I'm not going to stand until I see some of these changes, till things are in motion. You know, whether those goals were measurable at that time is not really what's important. What's important was he was taking a hard line there, and I wanted him to stand, but I wanted him to stand because he felt a sense of pride. He felt like he should. I don't want people to stand out of obligation or do anything out of obligation. I wouldn't want people to fight for my freedom out of obligation. So through that conversation, you know, I thought the fact that he was willing to give a little and adjust showed he was willing to listen, and that's going to make me listen to somebody when I know that they care enough and are sensitive enough to me and something that concerns me. And so that's what was most important, not the kneeling itself, just the compromise.
What's important to note about America, about our Constitution, about what you pointed out, who you were fighting alongside of other folks, the team members, Joe, you were, you know, playing alongside of, were from all different backgrounds, all different ethnicities, is that we have a choice in America. Yeah. That's part of the reason that Nate, or a big part of the reason that Nate was fighting over there for our freedoms, that we could, if we want to stand, we can stand. If we want to kneel, we could kneel. This is America. This is the free home of the brave. So I just have to ask you, you know, there's Malcolm Jenkins on the team who is questioning the president's motivations, and on and on. There are a lot of players out there. Where do you want to see this go? Yeah.
I mean,
this is for Joe. This is for Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So my thing is still for the president to actually try and understand. Like we said, when we talk about the differences and the divisiveness that the tone that he has set in America, you know, listen, Kim Kardashian had this talk to or seen this show, and in 3 weeks she was meeting with the president of the United States. You know, and here we are as African American professional athletes, and for people to think that because we're professional athletes that this thing doesn't happen to us. So, you know, here you guys, you made, you know, Colin signed for $100 million. You know, what is he complaining about? You know, but that does not cushion you from the realities of America. You know, I can speak specifically for myself. We played in Super Bowl 23, and after that, I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I go home, even though, you know, we lost to the 49ers, but still was a great experience. I get home, and I was stopped by the police 4 or 5 times. I had, at one incident, driving through Beverly Hills, I had the helicopters. I had 5 police officers, cars surrounding me. Got out, put guns to my head. I had the helicopter shining on me because they said that I fit a description. They got me out of the car in the rain, handcuffed me, and made me, told me to get on my knees. And it's pouring rain, and I said, man, I'm not getting on my knees because it's pouring rain. He put the gun to my head. So obviously, listen to my mother, I got down on my knees and listened to it. So they
not to cut you off, Joe, but
to,
just in the essence of time, often that happens to a lot of men of color and others in this country. And listen, we need to do it whether it has to do with African Americans, whites, Hispanics, or whatever. The issue of police brutality is real. And we always have to caveat and say there are great police officers out there, but as in any organization, there are some bad folks there. This White House, this administration should be concerned about police brutality because they represent all citizens, even the ones who did not vote for them. Thank you both. I could spend all evening with you, but I've got to run because I'm going up against time here. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Nate.
All right.
Big pleasure.
Hey, thanks, Don.
Continue to fight on. Thank you. When we come back, this is what Sarah Sanders thinks of the press.
Frankly, I think my credibility is probably higher than the media's.
We deal with this White House every day. Join me next. Astonishing moment from the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders today, claiming that her credibility is higher than the media's, accusing reporters of spending too much time attacking President Trump and trying to tear her down. Let's talk about this now with CNN's Jim Acosta. He's our chief White House correspondent, and CNN political analyst Brian Karem, the executive editor of Sentinel newspapers. This is fascinating. So, good evening. So, I just want to this, Jim, because Sarah Sanders got really defensive when she was asked why Americans should trust what they hear from this White House. Play it.
Sure.
I don't know how many times I have to address this, but I work every single day to give you accurate and up-to-date information, and I'm going to continue to do that. Frankly, I think my credibility is probably higher than the media's, and I think that in large part that's because you guys spend more of your time focused on attacking the president instead of reporting the news. I think that if you spent a little bit more time reporting the news instead of trying to tear me down, you might actually see that we're working hard trying to provide you good information and trying to provide that same good information to the American people.
Tearing her down, is she missing the point here? I don't think anyone's trying to tear her down. You're trying to get at the truth. Why is she taking this so personal, Jim?
Well, this is unfolding in a bad way for Sarah Sanders. It seems like we're getting close to the end, maybe, of her time here at the White House. She just was struggling over the last couple of days to explain this false statement, lie, whatever you want to call it, that the president did not dictate this memo to the New York Times about his son's Trump Tower meeting. Turns out that he did. And she was repeatedly peppered with questions about this, and she just isn't answering the question. The way she answered the question was to say, I'm providing the best, most accurate information that I can, and you guys are trying to tear me down. But she's being asked about false statements. It was just a few weeks ago when I asked her, are you lying or were you in the dark about this payoff to Stormy Daniels that Rudy Giuliani revealed? And I think, Don, what they're doing over these last few weeks is they have been sort of trying to clean up these lies that they told the American people in the past, and it's blowing up in their faces in the briefing room.
Brian, you got a lot of attention for calling Sarah Sanders out in the past. Is the briefing room getting more contentious now? It seems like it is.
Well, I'll tell you, I left her with this question today after she said what she said. I asked her what color was the sky in the president's world, because there is such a disconnect from reality in that press briefing room that it's actually, I've never seen anything like it, and I've been there since, coming and going since Reagan. When April tried to ask her question today, I jumped in and said, hey, answer the question. She was trying to avoid a very serious question, and at the same time, she will give you non-answers or nonsensical answers. And what Jim was talking about, she has avoided that question for at least 2 weeks. And the question I asked her was like, all right, fine, maybe you gave false information, but are you sorry you gave us false information? She won't answer that question. The fact of the matter is this White House, I think they view that press briefing as, gee, what's today's episode going to be like? And it's controlled It's staged, and they don't want to provide information. It was what Rudy Giuliani said last night on Chris Cuomo's show when he said, look, when we had to give them factual information to Mueller, that's when they gave it. That's when they believe they have to be factual before a court of law, and they don't understand that the President of the United States plays to a much larger audience. And by gosh, he owes us some answers that we haven't gotten.
So, Jim, you tweeted this out today, and I'm just an innocent bystander here and watching, and I've said this. I think we had this conversation very early on in this administration. I think you and I did on the air. You said one way to address a briefing is for reporters to stick together when the press sec cuts somebody off. Ideally, we could and should insist on answers if somebody is cut off. We don't do that as much as we should. Problem is there is so little time and so many pressing questions. I spoke with April earlier tonight, and I mean, I'm wondering if more reporters are sticking together when Sarah Sanders tries to evade questions or just abruptly stops someone and points to the other person. I think the next person should just ask the question, or as the reporter said today, I gladly yield my time to my
Steve
colleague.
Portnoy from CBS.
Yeah, go on, Jim.
Well, and I think that, and Don, your recollection is right. This happened at the infamous Trump Tower meeting or press conference when President Trump, at the time President-elect Trump, would not give me a question and called me fake news. The suggestion at that time, and we've been hearing it ever since, is why don't you reporters stick up for each other in the press conferences, in the briefing room, and if he's not going to take a question or if Sarah's not going to take a question or cut you off, that somebody else picks up the question and presses the press secretary or whoever on that issue. And I think we saw some of that today, and I think we got some pretty good results. Remember, the non-answers are as revealing as the answers. And what Sarah's been doing in the last 48 hours has been giving us non-answers. And I do think that what we're seeing, Don, more and more is fewer briefings in a compressed time. So you're having maybe 1 or 2 briefings a week, and they're lasting 15 to 20 minutes. Under Obama, it'd be over an hour, hour and a half sometimes. And so it behooves us, I think, in many cases, just to pick up where the other reporter left off until they finally give us an answer. We might not get as many questions answered, but we may get more answers.
Ryan, I got to go. We'll have to continue the conversation at another time. Sorry about that. Hey, appreciate it, guys. Continue to do great work. Thank you very much. When we come back, a judge ruling today that the president can be deposed in court. Can. Will that actually happen? A former White House counsel joins me on that possibility next. A legal setback for President Trump, who is being sued for defamation by Summer Zervos, a former Apprentice contestant. Joining me to talk about this, Jack Quinn, the former White House counsel to President Clinton. Jack, thank you so much.
Sure.
Good evening.
Glad to be here.
So, a New York judge ruled today that President Trump can be deposed in a sexual harassment case brought by the former Apprentice contestant Zervos. How concerned should the president's legal team be? And the president?
Well, if the president wants to know how concerned he should be, he should give Bill Clinton a call. You know, this is a concerning thing. The president is going to have to testify, in my judgment, just as he will with Mr. Mueller. The courts are not going to allow a president to simply say he's above the law. This nation, we fought a revolution to establish the principle that no one is above the law. This is a nation of laws. And from the Nixon case to the Clinton case, when presidents have evidence that's vital, they have to give it.
Yeah. So President Trump is facing the Mueller investigation, the investigation related to Michael Cohen and the New York lawsuits from Stormy Daniels, and a suit from Maryland and D.C. accusing him of violating the clause of the Constitution. If the president is deposed in this Zervos case, could it impact any of the other cases that were up there on the screen?
Well, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is that the president can entertain trouble if he's not truthful in providing that testimony. Remember, that's what tripped up President Clinton when he perjured himself in connection with the Paula Jones litigation.
So his attorney, Trump's attorney, Mark Kasowitz, argued that the president can't be tried in a state court because of the supremacy clause in the Constitution. Is he right?
No, he's not right. He can be required to provide evidence in state courts just as he can in federal courts.
He also said in court today that other accusers of the president are irrelevant in this defamation case. What do you think about that?
I don't know how the judge will rule in that. I mean, in cases like that, you know, it's conceivable that the judge would find that a pattern of conduct is of sufficient evidentiary weight that it should be allowed in. If that's the case, then testimony might be allowed from people with similar claims.
In the short time we have left, I want to ask you about this. The former FBI Director Andrew McCabe requesting immunity from the Senate Judiciary Committee for testifying at an upcoming congressional hearing. I mean, that hearing will focus on how FBI and Justice Department officials handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Is that a fair ask?
Of him? Is it fair for him to ask for immunity? Sure. I mean, if he can get immunity in return for his testimony, there's no reason why he shouldn't try to get it. I'm not entirely sure why he wants it, whether he's afraid that his testimony might be inconsistent with something he may have said under oath at a previous time. But, you know, there's no harm in asking.
You think he'll get it?
I can't answer that. I don't know that the committee will be willing to grant him immunity.
Yeah. Always a pleasure, Jack. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
We'll be right back. There's lots more live coverage for you here on CNN. Anderson Cooper is going to continue our live coverage now with election night in America. And then I'm going to see you right back here after him live at midnight. So don't go anywhere. See you later.
Good evening again. Polls have just closed in California, the biggest prize and the biggest night of political primaries before we get to November. Democrats looking to maintain momentum in the run-up to midterms that they hope will turn into a blue wave. They're, of course, facing a Republican base that could be reawakening. In the case of California, there's also the added twist of how the primary itself organized, with the top two vote-getters advancing to the general election regardless of party affiliation. We're bringing you returns throughout the hour. John King is at the Magic Wall, as always, breaking down the numbers and alerting us to any developing trends. Also joining us, Bakari Sellers, Mike Shields, Dana Bash, Gloria Borger, and David Chalian. Let me start with David Chalian. Just explain, David, why exactly these primaries tonight, particularly California, are so important.
So the story, the political story, the big political story of 2018 to watch is control of the House of Representatives in November. And tonight is probably the most consequential night in the primary season for the Democratic effort to position themselves in November to try and win the 23 seats they need to win in order to become the majority party in the House of Representatives. And if you're a Democratic strategist and you're looking at the map of the country, the first thing you're going to do is go to places that Hillary Clinton won, but where a Republican is the current sitting member of Congress.
And there's a lot of that in California.
So there are 23 in the country wide, but 7 in California. So that is a treasure trove of potential pickup opportunity. That's why putting forth candidates that can actually convert the potential into real pickup opportunity is what Democrats have at stake today.
It's tricky, though, in California because of the kind of primary that we're talking about, David.
It is. You mentioned at the top, Anderson, this top two system. So this is a reform that was put in place several years ago by Governor Schwarzenegger in California. Try and see if you can elect more moderates. Well, the system isn't necessarily working that way. What is happening in this year, because of all the anti-Trump resistance energy we've seen inside the Democratic Party, part of that enthusiasm is a slew of candidates running for office. So just take a look at one of the Southern California districts. We have a list of all the candidates from the 39th Congressional District in California. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Ds on that list, Democratic candidates in this one district that should be a real pickup opportunity for Democrats. If all those Democrats split the vote, then there's the chance that 2 Republicans end up as the top 2 finishers. Democrats end up being blocked out of a district that they really should be counting as one of their 23 to take over the majority.
There's also important gubernatorial governor's race in California and also Senate.
And that speaks to the bigger question of the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan's Republican Party in California, which is almost extinct as a Republican from California said to me earlier today. It's definitely an endangered species, almost getting there, because you mentioned because of this system, it is possible, maybe even probable, that certainly in the Senate race, the race to defeat Dianne Feinstein, who's running for a 6th term, that she is going to go up against a fellow Democrat. There won't be a Republican in the general. And same goes for the governor's race, the race to replace Jerry Brown, who's leaving. You have 3 Democrats who are very, very strong, and 2 Democrats who are very strong.
Gavin Newsom.
And Gavin Newsom, and then the former mayor of Los Angeles, and then you have the sort of the lone Republican there. The House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, put together an effort successfully to get a gas tax repeal on the ballot in order to try to lure Republicans to the voting booths today. Unclear if that's even going to help.
I just want to quickly run through all the key races to watch. Let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. So I presume there are no results in California yet. So what on the map should we be looking for tonight? Because obviously with California, it can take weeks to actually get the final results.
So we're going to look really for trends. We may not get in some of these close house races, and you're right, Anderson, nothing so far. They could come in any minute. I'll caution you when we do get the early results, that will be early vote counted, that's been counted during the day, that will be released at the top of the hour. So you'll see some of this fill in pretty quickly, but then the election day, today's voting will take longer to count. And you're absolutely right, especially in these close house districts. David Chalian just talked about a couple of them. We could be at this for a few days, could be at this for a week, could be at this for more. So we're going to wait to watch how this play out. The key question, of course, can the Democrats get candidates in all of those targeted races, or will they get locked out because of the jungle primary? There are 3 races where we think that's a distinct possibility. There could be more, but there are 3 where even the Democrats concede privately they may not have candidates in November in races that in January, February, March, right up to this month, they thought they had a pretty good chance of winning. That doesn't mean they can't take the House back, but it just makes the hill steeper. It complicates the math. So we're waiting for California. Just let me pull out the map and show you one other state. We do have some results in a state. I need to switch the map a little bit here. The Republican Senate primary in Montana. John Tester is the Democratic incumbent. He is unopposed in the primary. Remember, he had national prominence just recently when he was so public, outspoken against Dr. Ronnie Jackson, the president's pick to be the new Veteran Affairs Secretary. Dr. Jackson is now withdrawn as a pick. The president, though, has made this a priority. This is a state the president won huge. This is a state where we know he doesn't like the Democratic incumbent. Republicans are picking a candidate tonight. It's very close so far. Russ Fagg is a former state legislator, a former state judge. 32%. The state auditor, Matt Rosendale, 32%, 133 votes right now. The Republican Party, frankly, would be happy with any of these top 3 candidates. They think all 3 are mainstream conservatives, fit the state pretty well, would be a good opponent against John Tester. I do think even Republicans privately would concede right now. They give a slight edge to Tester in this race, because the president cares about it so much, because he won the state so big, and because, especially if Democrats do have a good sentiment, good momentum in the House heading close to November, protecting the Senate and trying to pick up a couple of these Democratic seats is going to be very important. So we'll watch this one for the rest of the night tonight. I just want to pull back out and go back to California just to see if anything's coming in. As you can see, this is the governor's race. Dana just mentioned. Could have 2 Democrats in November. See how that one goes. This is the Senate race. And I'll go back to the House races now. And we have absolutely nothing coming in on the map right now. Just one other we can't show you in the wall. We're not getting a live feed. You do have a Republican incumbent congresswoman in Alabama, Congresswoman Roby, who is forced into a runoff now. Why is that noteworthy? She was one of the Republicans when the Access Hollywood tape came out who said she would not vote for Donald Trump. She's now going to have a runoff.
Right.
Keep your eye on the White House to see if the president gets involved in that one.
All right, John, we're going to check in with you shortly. I want to go to, next to CNN's Maeve Reston with word on a snafu involving voter rolls in the state's biggest ballot region, L.A. County. So, Maeve, break it down for us exactly what happened and what does this mean for the congressional district and the governor's race?
So basically, Anderson, in the biggest county in the state, in Los Angeles County, there were something like 118,000 voters whose names did not appear on the roster today when they went to vote at the polls. And so that is potentially going to cause huge counting problems later on in the day for both the governor's race and also that very tight congressional race that we've been talking about in the 39th district. Basically, people turned up. They couldn't find their name. Some people were turned away, and they should have been given a provisional ballot. So there's potentially huge legal headaches ahead. And some of the candidates are already raising this as an issue. Antonio Villaraigosa, one of the gubernatorial candidates, saying that he wants to extend the voting period, for example.
I mean, how does it end? Are we talking about a possible recount if the races are that close? Because as you said, if some people were turned away, they were supposed to be given a provisional ballot and allowed to cast a vote.
Right. I mean, we might see huge legal fights over this, Anderson. Basically, whatever campaign would make that case, they would have to prove that there were a lot of voters that this happened to that were turned away and not given a provisional ballot. But clearly, this is going to be a big issue because a lot of these races will be decided on the margins, maybe by something like 1,000 votes or less than that. So we'll have to see how this all plays out.
All right, Maeve Reston, appreciate it. Back now with the panel. Gloria, just in terms of what you're looking for tonight,
Well, I'm just kind of looking for some irony in the state of California. You know, this is ground zero for the resistance, and if Democrats are shut out because they have too many enthusiastic voters. Curb Your Enthusiasm comes to mind. They have too many candidates, as we were talking about. This could be a real problem for Democrats. I mean, those 7 districts that Hillary Clinton won in are real targets for them. They've got some real opportunity there. And they've tried, and you guys know about this, they've tried to get people off the ballot. I think the National Democrats may have gotten involved in this a little bit too late, but it's dangerous when you try and tinker in primary races. But they find themselves with such enthusiasm. So many candidates want to run, but because of the way this primary system runs, they could end up hurting themselves with this and wind up with no Democrats in the top 2 because they split the vote.
Mike Shields, what are you looking at?
Well, and they've had to spend money. And
yes,
so the amount of money the Democrats have had to spend in California to try and fix this horrible problem equals everything the Republicans had spent in the special elections so far in this cycle. So we had overspent in the specials, and that was a problem for us. We've now sort of even spending on sort of problem races because the Democrats are approaching $8 million from their super PAC and the DCCC to come in and try and pick and do these sort of bank shots of picking these candidates. Yeah. And it's still, there's no idea if any of that's ever going to work because of the enthusiasm. The other thing I'd point out, something like 70% of people in California vote early. And so interesting how that plays in Los Angeles County when you have those provisional ballots. And then the other thing is, and actually in California 49, the Darrell Issa district, there's actually a chance the Republicans get frozen out there. The numbers so far in the early voting show in a couple of the districts that Republicans have turned out in heavier numbers through the mail, which is usual for us. And so the ultimate thing I would say about California is California is a country. It's not like a regular state where you can sort of say, is that district similar to this one? Is the turnout high there? There's some of these districts where Republicans are super, super motivated, and there's other ones where they're less motivated. There's some where the Democrats are just off the charts, and there's some where they're for some reason they're not as motivated. The districts are super far apart from each other. They're spread out, and they're different parts of the state have really different political influences in them. So just add that to the complicated nature of what we're trying to sort through.
Corey, I mean, as a Democrat, are you optimistic tonight?
Well, there are two things. I mean, politically speaking,
I think a yes or no question.
I'm gonna hedge my way through this.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who perceive that Democrats may get locked out of a couple of races, and Democrats always screw the pooch when we have the opportunity to take back the House or do things that are good in these elections. I look at it from a slightly different perspective because I don't see how we're spinning enthusiasm to be a bad thing. I think this will balance out. The over-enthusiasm we have in California, that's going to spill over into the suburbs in Pennsylvania. That's going to play a role in North Carolina. That's going to be in Georgia. That's going to be in a Senate race in Tennessee. And so, yes, we may have a race or two that we should pick up in California that we do not, but Republicans have an enthusiasm problem around the country. And, you know, if for Democrats, for Tom Perez to get involved in any of these races, that's very, very difficult needle to thread. And so by staying out of it for the most part, allowing this enthusiasm and the chips to fall where they may, I think we'll see some balance, maybe not tonight, but further down the road. And to look at one county in particular, I think if Democrat enthusiasm is where we believe it to be, you have to look at Orange County, California. It is the red area in all of California. And in particular, the Asian American Pacific Islander vote. Democrats have been focused on turning those voters out, making sure that a coalition that looked a lot like Barack Obama's coalition in 2008 and 2012 is replicated in Orange County. And you may have some surprises in the Orange County elections.
Yeah, and the Republicans have nominated an Asian, they haven't nominated. There's an Asian woman, Young Kim, who's used to work for Ed Royce, whose seat it is. They take that very seriously. The NRCC, the House Campaign Committee, has an office they've opened up to do a ground game just to turn out Republicans in that district.
What you're seeing is you're seeing within a larger state, smaller little battles taking place. And what it's going to show is how the rest of 2018 is going to play out. I'm going to bet, I'd rather Democrats be enthusiastic than sitting on their hands. And so if this is a problem, let it be the best problem.
To that point, I mean, you'll agree with me on this.
I doubt it.
Well, no, I think we talked about this before. I worked at the NRCC in the 2010 cycle, and we started to get involved in primaries, and we quickly learned our lesson.
Correct, yeah.
It is best to not do that because it dampens the enthusiasm. They get mad at the establishment. You actually hurt
Why does it
candidates.
dampen the enthusiasm?
Because the grassroots doesn't want the national party to come in and tell them what to do, and they end up siding with the candidate who isn't being backed by the national party quite often. And you're stuck in this place because you're at the party and you're being told by everyone else, control this primary, get the right person through, and yet when you try to do that, it hurts them. And the Democrats have been all over the place this cycle. Down in Texas, in California, and other states where they're trying to get involved. Some places they've been successful. Other places they've really hurt the candidate they were trying to help. And it actually dampens the enthusiasm that you're talking about.
I agree with the larger pieces.
But they did it successfully, at least tonight, in a place like New Jersey, which is one of those states where they are hoping that they'll get a number of pickups that will add to the larger 23 in order to take back the House. And they did put their thumb on for the moderates there.
I got to get a break in. John King's back shortly. We get a new wave of returns coming in. More on the Alabama surprise next. Later, the shifting explanations also for the president's White House disinvite, I guess, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, as well as the very real political reason for the presidential diss.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us.
In just the last few minutes, we've gotten some new California primary numbers coming in. Let's quickly head back to John King. John?
Starting to get the fill-in on the House primary map, Anderson. We can show you the Senate and the governor's race as well. A lot of this is pretty predictable. This is a Republican incumbent winning big in his district. This is a Republican incumbent winning big in his district here. This is the Democratic incumbent here. This, though, is one of the races that we're very much watching. The incumbent Republican, Jeff Denham. Why is this race more important than some of the other races? This is one of the 7 Republican districts in California that Hillary Clinton carried in 2016. So this is one of the 7 Democrats are most targeting. What they need now to run against a Republican incumbent is a good Democratic candidate. You see right now, this is a district where Democrats do believe they will not get locked out. They believe they will have a Democratic candidate, but it does highlight what you've been talking about throughout the evening. The incumbent, 38%. Right now, there's a Democrat in second place, but we're very early in the count, and tonight might not sell it. Just want to show you, there's a Republican candidate in third. Look at these other candidates. A Democrat at 10%, almost 11%. A Democrat at 10%. A Democrat at 9%. A Democrat at 2.2%. A Democrat at 1.1%. If you add up all these Democratic votes, the Democrats are actually getting about 50% of the votes cast today. They're just split among a number of candidates. So the question to watch is, Jeff Denham is going to make the November election, the Republican incumbent. Will the Democrats come in second and get a candidate here? Again, why is this so important? Just want to walk you over here. These are the 7 Republican districts carried by Hillary Clinton in 2016 that are on the ballot now. Ed Royce is not running for re-election. Darrell Issa is not running for re-election. These other Republican incumbents are. The Democrats think if we're going to pick up 5 or 6 seats in California, these are the best opportunity targets. Again, Jeff Denham running again. We'll watch the results come in his district. Let me just pop back out and see where else the results are coming in. Right now, they're coming in either Democratic or Republican districts that we think are pretty solid for each party heading in. On the House side, we'll keep an eye on it. Let's look at the governor's race. Again, this is very, very preliminary, so don't bet on anything. But Dianne Feinstein is running well ahead. Right now, there's a Republican in second. Everyone expects Kevin DeLeon will be the other Democrat, that this will be a 2-Democrat race in November. Why not? Why don't invest in that? These votes are coming in from Republican areas right now. You don't have any Democratic votes from Los Angeles, not much from San Francisco. When the Democratic areas come in, everyone expects DeLeon will move up. The other point, just take a quick look at the governor's race. Again, Republicans will be encouraged at these early numbers. Gavin Newsom, the Democrat, running first. John Cox, the Republican, running second. The big question is, does the former L.A. Mayor Anthony Villaraigosa make this a 2-Democrat race, or does John Cox hang on? Again, don't invest anything in the early numbers. Look where the votes are coming in. Central to Eastern California, much more Republican areas. We're still waiting for the votes here. But this jungle primary, Anderson, it guarantees a long night, and it makes it interesting.
And just the votes you're talking about, those are actually ones that have been written in. It's not actually votes of people voting today, correct?
For the most part, yes. The vote that came in early through the mail ballots, and then we will get the actual count in all these precincts. So that's why you get these big numbers, pretty decent sized numbers pretty quickly. That's the early vote. But remember, you could cast your vote up till today. So there will be votes that were mailed today that will not be counted for several more days. So if it's close in these House districts, if it's close, a close call between second and third, which will be a big fight in many of these races, we might not know the answer tonight. We might not know the answer tomorrow morning. We might not know the answer until into next week or beyond.
Yeah, John King, thanks very much. More now on that big race in Alabama, which could be a key sign of how much the Republican Party has become the party of Donald Trump. Dana mentioned this top of the broadcast. Republican Congresswoman Martha Roby failing to get 50% of the vote tonight for return to a runoff. Congresswoman Roby, you'll recall, criticized candidate Trump and dropped her support for him after the Access Hollywood tape came out. She'll now face a former Democrat, Bobby Bright, next month. Back now with the panel. David, do you think there's some hanging in the White House tonight as these returns come in? Because there's obviously been plenty of talk about, Democrats' possible impeachment if they do take back the House.
Well, on that Martha Roby race, I don't know that there's hand-wringing as much as note-taking in the White House. Certainly, it is something that the president is keenly paying attention to. What is happening with Republicans who backed him? What's happening with Republicans who walked away from him? And how might he determine his support for those candidates based on their support for him? It's a bit of a loyalty test. Our colleagues in our White House team have been reporting this out today. And so somebody like Martha Roby, who now is forced into a runoff, clearly should not be anticipating the president's help anytime soon. She walked away from him after that Access Hollywood tape, and that's exactly the kind of person that the president and his political team would not say, yes, sir, get in there. We really want Martha Roby back in Congress. Normally, you would expect a president to go in and defend an incumbent and want to help to get them reelected, but that's not the case.
Well, and it speaks to what former Speaker John Boehner said last week, which is the Republican Party is becoming the Trump Party. This is Exhibit A of that, because Martha Roby was forced into a runoff tonight for one reason and one reason only. It is because she got on the wrong side of Donald Trump and his supporters. Full stop. And the fact that she is somebody who is a popular member of Congress, a popular Republican, and not sort of in the inside the beltway kind of thing, but even among her constituents, and yet there is so much blowback still from the fact that she unendorsed the president 2 years ago, really is telling about where the base of the party is, and it's solidly in Donald Trump's camp.
Well, it is Donald Trump's Republican Party, and as our White House team was reporting today, and David mentioned it, they're making a list over there about friends and foes, and the president is going to work to defeat Jon Tester in Montana because of what happened to Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who was nominated, and then had to withdraw to be the head of the VA, and a friend of Donald Trump's. And he is going to support the people who support him. This is who Donald Trump is, come hell or high water, and defeat the people who have hurt him. And I think she is feeling that right now, particularly in a state like Alabama, of course. But that's what you're going to see from the president.
We should just underscore what we're saying here, because we're saying that Martha Roby, by going sort of against Trump inside the Republican Party, who is she forced into a runoff with? A former Democrat.
Right.
He just became a Republican inside this Trump Republican Party in February. Right? Yeah, who she previously beat. He was a former Democratic member of Congress, Bobby Bright. That's who she's forced into a runoff with. That's how much the undercurrent inside the Republican Party right now is on the Trump energy. Exactly. That's the life force inside the party.
It's his party.
Picard, do you expect the Democrats to run on impeachment in the fall?
I think they'll run on the fact, even a larger theme, that this is Donald Trump's party. I mean, when you have a president whose approval ratings are around 40, when it's not a party that has core values. I mean, they're not supporting Bobby Bright because of the fact that he has conservative values. There's no way he's conservative enough to represent that district at this point in time, when just last week or 3 months ago, he was a Democrat. And so I think that what Democrats are feeling is, yes, we have a lot of enthusiasm, but the fact is we're putting Donald Trump on the ballot. We have ideas, and everybody will talk about the ideas of the Democratic Party, but people, if they're honest with themselves, know that 2018 is a referendum on Donald Trump. And no matter what your ideas are about what we're going to do about the sovereignty of Social Security or foreign policy or the Affordable Care Act, this is a referendum on Donald Trump, and this is Donald Trump's party. It's a petty party, and it's one that doesn't have any core values, and Democrats are going to seize on that opportunity.
I think Republicans are going to run on impeachment, to be honest, because we already hear Rudy Giuliani talking about it and Republicans talking about
Warning
it.
the Democrats.
And the president himself saying they're trying to steal
advice?
Yeah, I mean,
presidency.
look, I should disclose, by the way, I do work with the NRCC, so just in full disclosure, First of all, I disagree with something Bakari said earlier about the enthusiasm. That enthusiasm gap is closing. It's one of the reasons why we've seen the generic ballot go from 18 points to about 3 or 4 points, because Republicans are getting more energized. When you start talking about impeachment, they're going to get even more energized. And another problem the Democrats have, a problem that Bobby Bright has in this runoff, is that he voted for Nancy Pelosi when he was a Democrat. And Nancy Pelosi and impeachment together are two things that will motivate the Republican base to show up. What's interesting you're saying about it being the president's party, there's about 15 districts that are sort of in the battleground that were Romney Clinton districts, like these ones in California, right? But there's another 15 or so that were actually Obama Trump districts. If you look at the Pennsylvania special that we lost, that was a 10,000 vote Democrat seat, but everyone called it a Republican seat because the Republican had held it and Trump won it by 20 points. Trump wasn't on the ballot, and it caused us a problem. So there are some districts where you're going to want the president to come in there every single day and campaign for that person. And there's other places where you're just going to have to turn out regular Republicans. So you can't just sort of...
What does that even mean? What does that
Well, I mean, regular Republicans in the sense that not necessarily just the Trump. There's two parts of the party, right? There are the Republicans that are going to back the president because they're Republicans, and there are former Democrats and union workers that are coming out and supporting the president.
I got to get a break in. More primary results coming up also throughout the night here on CNN. Devin Nunes after the break. Also the combined politics of football and the flag that kept the Philadelphia Eagles on the sidelines today and left the president singing the national anthem instead. New numbers again in some key California races. Let's go back to John King in the Magic Wall. John?
Anderson, how are you? I'm waiting for Brian to come over here, help me with the camera to get a little closer. Sorry, you caught him off guard a little bit, but let's watch the results come in. One of the races we're looking for here, this is the Darrell Issa district, California 49. Darrell Issa is not running for re-election. Again, this is one of the 7 districts Hillary Clinton carried in the 2016 presidential election. And so Democrats are thinking maybe we have a shot here. The leading candidate right now is a Republican. It looks like we'll have a Democrat challenger in this race. I just want to show you again, in these races where Democrats think they have a chance, look at all the blue. There's a bunch of Republicans too because it's open, but you have a lot of Democratic candidates as well. At the moment in the Darrell Issa district, you have a Republican on top. Democrats fighting it out to see there. Let's move a little bit to the north here. This is the Dana Rohrabacher district. He is a controversial Republican incumbent running for re-election. At the moment, there's a Democrat in second place here, but this is one of the districts where Republicans believe they may have 2 candidates. Scott Baugh, a Republican candidate running. We'll count the votes again. This one might not be settled tonight, but the incumbent in first place, and again, people view this seat as another one of these Clinton districts. They view it as competitive. And look, a Republican here, a Democrat here. And look at all these candidates come out to run because they see the opportunity. That's why the vote is being split among all these candidates, some of whom in these races stopped campaigning when they realized they were low, but they're still on the ballot. You see the vote split. This is one of the factors tonight in the jungle primary. But at the moment in the Rohrabacher district, the incumbent running ahead. The question is, will his opponent be a Democrat or another Republican in November? We'll sort that one out. Let's move up the map a little bit to come up here. Again, this is a Republican district. You move over here. A Republican district, you move here. You pull this out a little bit. You can move further up to the north here. A name everybody knows nationally, the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes running for re-election. Democrats have this dream of winning this district because they say Nunes has become so tied to the Russia investigation. He's lost track with his agriculture district. Republicans will tell you this is a pretty solid, safe Republican seat. The Democrats are dreaming, but it is a race we'll watch because of the congressman's national prominence. He's running well ahead, and it looks like he will get a Democratic opponent. If you look, Democrat second, and then a huge drop-off here. So Nunes is likely to have a traditional Democrat-Republican race. Again, Democrats put this on their dream list. I'd be very skeptical about that, Anderson. We're watching the rest of the results come in. Those are the 2 big ones. The Issa race and the Rohrabacher race, interesting because they were Clinton districts. Will be renominated and have an opponent. The rest of these, again, we showed you the Denham race earlier. The Republican incumbent on top. Does he get a Democrat? Does he get a Republican? We're going to be asking that question a lot throughout the night and into the morning as well.
All right, we'll come back to you shortly, John. David, how much are we seeing play out the divisions within the Democratic Party between progressives and moderates?
Well, it's interesting. In different pockets, we're seeing different things. In Iowa, Bernie Sanders, so the Sanders versus the Clinton dynamic in the party, Bakari can certainly speak to this, but the Sanders juice inside the party that was part of the 2016 race doesn't seem to be translating just yet to all of the people he has endorsed. And Iowa is the biggest example of that tonight. The guy who ran the Sanders campaign in Iowa that basically drew Hillary to to a tie in those caucuses, if you remember. He's not going to come through as the Democratic nominee tonight, despite the fact that Bernie Sanders was on TV for him, raised a lot of money for him. So I think that divide in the party certainly exists. There's no doubt that there's a tension between the grassroots energy and the establishment wing. We see it on the Republican side, too. But I don't think that the party, because of the Trump factor, which is a unifying factor for the Democratic Party, I don't think we're going to see the divisions sort of tear the party apart this cycle. Maybe we'll save that.
Can I speak to one impact he has had, though? So maybe some of his endorsed candidates haven't gotten through. But one of the reasons is because the ones that did get through moved to the left. And so in California, you have a Medicare for all, a single-payer health care plan in the state that was rejected even by the supermajority legislature. And you have candidates that are running for Congress tonight who said they would be for that plan in Congress. And so Bernie's impact, there are primaries across the country where Democrats are moving hard to the left on a lot of these issues
Medicare
like
for all,
health care.
$15
And so he has had a huge impact. And by the way, we as Republicans that benefits when we get to the general election because they will be nominating people that are far to the left.
And the Democratic Party believes that would benefit you too, which is why they've been trying to steer the party towards more establishment candidates.
Democrats' problem this cycle, and I don't think we need to shift focus. Democrats' problem this cycle has been the sheer quantity of candidates. It's not the quality of candidates, because we haven't had the faux pas that the Republican Party has had by nominating somebody who is just completely out of the box, who can general election. I do think, though, that the divisions that we begin this conversation about are fizzling away. There are people like myself who are engaged and in the trenches who simply don't want to relitigate the primary of 2016 anymore. I mean, we're beyond that. In Georgia, for example, just last week, you had Bernie Sanders, Nina Turner, myself, Kamala Harris, so many people who were on different sides of this come together for Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams got 80% of the vote, and now she literally has a credible chance to be the next governor of Georgia. We can argue that point later. But I'm just saying that there are a lot of individuals who are setting that aside, all because we have one unifying factor in the Democratic Party.
That's for 2018, Bakari, but the day after the midterms, when you have 20 Democrats running for president, those divisions are going to reemerge.
Can we do one thing at a time? Let's focus
on the very leadership of your party between Perez and Ellison. There are still some things that are playing out. Ellison's now leaving Congress and running for Attorney General.
Do you know why? Because Attorney Generals are spear to the Donald Trump presidency. It's the same thing Javier Becerra did. You still
have a superdelegate fight going on in your piece. So the idea that this is all smoothed over and everything's just fine, I think is a little bit of...
So
it's not in the weeds for
the first 10 minutes of tonight, we were having a discussion about the fact that Democrats were too enthusiastic. And now we're at the halfway point and we're saying that Democrats are broken.
Well, it's not a question of too enthusiastic. It's just a question of how that enthusiasm, that very real enthusiasm, is playing into this very odd system in California. No one's arguing that enthusiasm isn't helpful at places tonight like New Mexico or New Jersey or even Iowa. I mean, that's a given. It's just that in the state of California, where we're focused tonight, because of the jungle primaries, it makes it very difficult. The other thing I just want to say is, remember the last time Democrats swept, 2006? They did it for lots of reasons. It was the big anger about the Iraq War and so forth. But a big part of the reason they were able to do that is because Rahm Emanuel and other leaders of the Democratic Party then found and made sure that the candidates the districts. And so it's harder to do that with the kind of enthusiasm that you have right now. It's harder to do that when you have
we've seen that in the early races that we've already seen.
That's right. Well, don't forget, though, Connor Land had no primary.
But that's what I'm saying. So but Democrats have been doing a great job at that, because if you look at our Senate candidates who are up in tough races, they're running unopposed. Or little opposition. So we're not out there nominating a Todd Aiken. We're not out there nominating the woman who thought she was a witch in Delaware. We're not doing Christine O'Donnell. We are not doing those things. What we're doing is we're actually making sure we have enthusiasm and we have people running. And the people who win these primaries are going to have a credible shot.
We're going to have more tonight on the Republican, the GOP's evolution, as we've been discussing, to the party of Trump. We'll talk more about one issue that could be moving it in that direction, the national anthem, the NFL, and today's flap over the Eagle. We're continuing to keep our eye on primary numbers coming in from California and elsewhere. We'll check back in with John King shortly. But first, a story from the intersection of politics and culture and football. The Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles were originally supposed to visit the White House today. Last night, the president pulled the plug. He first said it was because players wouldn't stand for the national anthem. That wasn't true of any Eagles, actually, during the regular season last year. Then he accused them of some of them staying in the locker room during the national anthem. That also was not true either of any Eagles last season. Then Press Secretary Sarah Sanders accused team members who weren't attending of disrespecting their fans. Then she also said it was a political stunt by the team, that they informed the White House just before the event that only a few representatives of the team would be coming, and then offered to reschedule when the president would be overseas. Best we can tell, there are only really two significant solid facts in this controversy at this point. One, a substantial number of Eagles did not want to meet with the president. And secondly, that the president, as sources told our Jim Acosta tonight, believes attacking the NFL is a winning political tactic. Certainly is a favorite subject of his over the last several months.
Not have people disrespecting our national anthem, our flag, our country, and that's what they're doing. And in my opinion, the NFL has to change. Or you know what's going to happen? Their business is going to go to hell.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. Well, you shouldn't be playing, you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
Back now with the panel. Mike, at the time of the midterms, the NFL season is going to be in full swing. Is this obviously is not an issue going away anytime, at least from the president. Is this a winning issue for the president to be pushing?
The numbers would say it is, and the numbers, if you looked at the ratings for the NFL, it would tell you this is we've discussed, it's a cultural fight, and it kind of puts Democrats in an odd position because they are forced to support the players for reasons that are understandable for what the players are talking about. That's where Democrats are going to wind up. But the president's putting them cleverly in a place where they're not for the flag and the military. And they're explaining, no, I am for the flag and the military. And by the time you get there, you've really done damage to yourself, because when you're explaining, you're losing. He's picked a wedge issue here where the American people are with him, saying the flag is what brings us together. Go protest it a different way. Why would you do it during the national
I can't even remember what election it was, but years ago it was the burning the flag issue, which was kind of a wedge issue. Bakari, do you think this is a danger for Democrats?
Not at all. I mean, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think that sometimes in this country, I know we're talking about wins and losses politically, especially here on election night, but there are things that may be slightly larger than that. And the unfortunate part is the president of the United States is as petty as they come. And so he is the only president we've seen in recent history to dive right into culture war after culture war after culture war and use that as a political ploy. When it's very obvious, as you just said, when it's very obvious what he's doing is he's dividing the country. The fact is this.
But other presidents have
utilized culture wars to this extent? No. I don't think we have seen a president that utilized culture wars to this extent. The fact is this, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. These players are kneeling because of injustices, racial injustices, police brutality in this country. No one is disrespecting the flag. No one is disrespecting our military. And the fact that there are voters out there who want to see it as such means that we have to do a better job of educating voters, because that's simply not the case.
Isn't one of the things that we've learned that if they're offended, they have the right to be offended? You're saying it shouldn't offend them, and they're saying it does offend me. And we've learned that on the other side of these conversations over and over again.
No.
There is a massive group of Americans who watches this happening, and I actually think it hurts the cause of the players, because there's ways for them to talk about this that would not also divide the country and do it. When Colin Kaepernick decided to take a knee during the national anthem, he knew it was being provocative, and he knew there was going to be consequences for what he did, or else it wouldn't have been a brave act.
Actually, Nate Boyer, a military hero, actually was the one that advised him. But let me
finish my point. So he knew that he was going to do something provocative. That's why he did it during the national anthem, because he wanted to offend people so that they would listen.
That's absurd.
Because he wanted them to listen to his message. He could have just stood outside the stadium.
That's absurd. You don't want to offend people. You want to raise consciousness. And this argument,
well, if he didn't want to offend people, he failed.
Let me finish. There are two things. There are two things that you need to understand. And in America, I hope we'll understand. There are two things. The first is that you telling oppressed people how they should protest is patently absurd. Not only is it violative,
they should do it.
I'm gonna finish my
They're gonna
thought.
face
I'm gonna finish
consequences
my
for how
thought.
they do it.
Not only is it violative of our First Amendment, but it's patently absurd. I mean, like I said last night, I'll repeat it again. It's you and people like you who would tell Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis they don't need to march across the bridge at Selma.
Absolutely
they should
untrue.
find somewhere else.
No,
or
that's
you
not
should
true.
not have a sit-in because you're making
No,
other.
there's
I'm
my
gonna
point.
finish my
A
thoughts,
sit-in
though.
is a
I'm gonna
very
finish my
different
thoughts.
kind
Let me-
of, well, I'm not
I-
going to have you disparage
well,
what I believe about the civil rights movement
Well, let me
by
tell you
saying
this.
I would not be for them marching across the
saying
bridge. It's
that
just not true.
Because you're uncomfortable, because Colin Kaepernick, Eric Reed, the Philadelphia Eagles make you uncomfortable, that is success. And secondly, the reason that it's a hearing to talk about NFL ratings is because there's no more socially conscious league in the United States of America than the National Basketball Association. What has happened to their ratings? They've skyrocketed. What did the Golden State Warriors do last year? They didn't show up at the White House. What did they do? They went to the National African American History Museum. They went to Kevin Durant's old high school and gave back. They could care less about the President of the United States. And their global stature has increased. So it's a red herring.
They protested in ways that weren't provocative and designed to offend people. And so here's my point. I actually agree with some of the things that the players, I personally agree with some of the things that players, I wish that they had done it in a different way. It would be easier for me to talk about what it is that they stand for.
Why can't, because I take a knee, why can't you take police brutality is wrong?
Let me finish.
Okay.
Okay, here's the difference between going to a lunch counter and getting arrested, because you should have had the right to go in the lunch counter in the first place. That's different than chaining yourself to a building when you know there's going to be consequences for your protest. These players, none of us, right, we work for CNN. We couldn't just decide to walk out of here right now as a protest and not face consequences from our employer. So why would they be trying to sort of do a brave act, and then when they face the consequences of it, they're up in arms about it?
Nobody's up in arms about it. They're not up in arms about
The
it.
president is up in arms.
The president's up in arms about it. They're not up in
The
arms
Eagles
about it.
won't even go to the White House.
They
This started
will
today
not-
because they did not want to
They
go.
won't- If the president was serious about this, and let's just cut the BS, if the president was serious about this, he would have Malcolm Jenkins in the White House talking about criminal justice reform, real serious people in the White House talking about criminal justice reform. He wouldn't trot out Kanye West and Kim Kardashian talking about this is good for the black vote. Everything he does, every single thing he does is a calculated chess move and a culture war, a larger culture war. And it may work, but it's just dividing our country.
There's no question that he has his finger on the pulse of how to engage and enrage the culture wars better than anybody. And when I say better, I mean in a more politically astute way. That's how he got where he got. That's how he got to the White House. But it's not the first time a president has engaged in culture wars. I covered and followed George W. Bush around in 2004 when he was running for re-election. His campaign made sure that there were anti-gay marriage referenda on the ballot across the country, and it helped him.
Bill Clinton did this
And on the flip side, as well. So it's not the first time, and it is. You guys are having a very important policy discussion, but this is raw politics. This is blatant, absolute raw politics.
I think with Trump, though, it's personal. I mean, it is personal. It is raw politics. I agree with you 100%. But it's also personal for him. It's about him. He was offended. He wasn't going to have the photo op that he wanted, so he canceled this. And you can't take Trump out of anything Trump does and say it's also not about him personally.
Got to get another quick break in. When we continue, the very latest from those California primary races. Numbers now from California coming up an hour after poll closing. Let's go to John King. What do we know?
Starting slowly, Anderson, see the House map fill in. I just want to caution you, we're getting early results. We don't have a lot of today votes. It's mostly early votes. But some of the House districts we're keeping an eye on, some because they're competitive, some because they have interesting personalities. Duncan Hunter, for example, a Republican incumbent, districts down by San Diego. This is a solid Republican seat. He's under investigation for some corruption allegations. A lot of questions, can he survive? Well, he's certainly surviving his primary tonight. That for you. Let's move up the coast a little bit. California 49th is Darrell Iss's district. He's a national name, used to be chairman of the Oversight Committee, a thorn in the Obama administration side. He is retiring. Why do we care about this district? Number one, because it's an open race. Number two, Hillary Clinton carried this Republican-held district, so it's one of the Democrats' top targets. It looks like, again, it's only 4% of the vote. Right now, a Republican in first place and a bunch of Democrats competing for the second spot. This one's going to take a while. Again, that number hasn't changed in a while. I just want to move up the coast again. A race we're watching nationally again. Dana Rohrabacher, close to Vladimir Putin, gets a lot of controversy even from his fellow Republicans running for re-election. This was another one of those 7 Clinton districts. Democrats think they have a chance here along the coast. Right now, you have a Democrat in second place, a Republican close behind. Republicans think this is possibly one of the races where the Democrats get locked out. We're only at 16%. We're waiting for the votes there as we watch this play out. Another one I mentioned earlier, Nunes, again, Democrats dream because of his prominence in the Russia investigation of knocking off the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. This is a pretty solid Republican district. Devin Nunes winning comfortably or leading comfortably. Only 5% in. We'll see who his Democratic opponent is. One last quick point, Anderson. This is why this matters. These are the 7 districts Clinton carried, now represented by Republicans. Democrats think they can have. Here's the problem. They're worried that in 3 of them, 3 of the 7, because of this jungle primary, it is possible. We're going to count the votes. Could take several days. But Democrats are worried. In 3 districts, they could win in November if they have a strong candidate. They might not have a candidate because of this jungle primary. That's the big drama in California tonight.
Yeah, unusual primary in California. John, thanks very much. We'll be right back with more. That's about all the time we have for tonight. Thanks very much for watching this special edition of 360. Our primary coverage continues, however. CNN Tonight with Don Lemon starts now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Just about midnight here on the East Coast. We're live with all the information for you on this breaking news on election eve here, on the election night, I should say. It's election night in America, the biggest primary night of the year so far. Votes being counted right now from coast to coast. And what we learned tonight could tell us a lot about whether there will be a blue wave in the midterms come November. So 8 states voting. But California is really make or break. Take a look at your screen right there. If Democrats are going to have a shot at taking back the House, it could all come down to really the Golden State here. So tonight's vote really, really matters nationwide. We have a lot to get to over the coming hours here on CNN. I want to go straight, though, to CNN's chief national correspondent, Mr. John King. He's at the Magic Wall for us this evening, this morning, in just a couple minutes, a couple seconds, depending on where you are. Hi, John. 8 states with primary races, including a state that likes to be a thorn in Trump's side. I'm talking about California. What do you know? Give us the very latest.
No question about it. In such a blue state, Don, in presidential politics, a blue state, blue governor, blue state with House delegation, you would think if there's a blue wave, California is going to send a big message to President Trump. How big will the blue wave be? That's the big question in November. We're watching these House primaries. We're watching these 53 House districts, 39 of them held by Democrats, the others held by Republicans. Really, 8 or 10 of them matter most to us tonight. As we watch them, one of the big questions is this jungle primary. California rules. Top 2 finishers. Doesn't matter party. Republicans finish first, second, on the ballot in November. 2 Democrats, same thing. So Democrats, the big worry for Democrats is in some of the districts they think they should be competitive in November, they're worried tonight because so many Democrats are running, they might not even have a candidate. Let's go down the ballot here. This is a safe Republican seat, Duncan Hunter, but he's been in some trouble because of ethics and corruption investigations. He's winning his primary tonight. If he wins that, it's a safe Republican seat normally. We'll watch that into November. This one gets more interesting. This is Darrell Iss's district. He is not running for re-election. Darrell Issa, nationally known, used to be the Oversight Committee chairman in the Obama administration, a Republican thorn in the previous president's side, not running for re-election. Hillary Clinton won this district in the presidential year 2016, so Democrats logically say this should be one of our targets in 2018. Right now, a Republican in first. The question is, will there be a Democrat in second? You see all these candidates running because it's an open seat. Only 4% of the vote in, Don. This one could take well into the morning, could even take well into the week before we see the candidates. Another key race, another Clinton district, Republican held. Dana Rohrabacher, the incumbent here, Republican. The question, does Dana Rohrabacher run against a Democrat or against a Republican? Again, only 16% of the vote in. A lot of other candidates down here as well. This is going to take a while to count, but another one of those districts. Just want to pull out the map a little bit to show you just another name you know well. You've mentioned it quite a bit on your show last year. Why? Devin Nunes is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, very prominent in defending the president, accusing the FBI of spying on the Trump campaign, for example. He's comfortably winning his primary. Democrats have had dreams of winning this district in 2018. They say he's become a national Republican. He's ignoring this farm district. It's a pretty safe Republican seat, but let's see who his opponent is as it plays out. Let me move over here, Don, just to show you why this matters. Democrats need 23 seats to take back the House. They came into the year thinking they could get 7 or 8 of that 23, right, California. These are the districts here, these 7, Republican held now, carried by Hillary Clinton. Makes perfect sense, right? She won them in 2016. 2018 should be a blue year. We should be able to get them. Here's the problem with the jungle primary rule. The Democrats are worried that in 3 of these districts at least, Ed Royce is retiring, Darrell Issa is retiring. I just mentioned Dana Rohrabacher. Democrats are worried because so many Democrats ran in these races, they'll split a vote, and you could end up with 2 Republicans on the ballot in November. So they could get locked out of 3 districts that they think, if they have a candidate, they got a pretty good chance of winning. That's the drama of the count tonight. And I can bet you in at least 1 or 2 of these districts, Don, we'll be talking about this Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We might.
We're learning a lot more about the California and how the voting, how it actually works there. You mentioned the jungle primary and that Democrats have fears of being shut out there. Why did they go to this particular system in the first place, John?
Governor Schwarzenegger, who was more of an independent, elected first in a recall election, was trying to push political reforms. A lot of Democrats in the California legislature was dominated by Democrats who went along with him. They thought they wanted to shake things up because of gerrymandering, because of other political stagnation, if you will. They thought this was the way to go. A lot of people thought it was a good idea at the time. A lot of Democrats were behind it at the time. A lot of them are having second thoughts this year, Don.
Mr. John King, thank you very much. You got a lot of people here who are giggling at your last comment. I will introduce them now. So I want to thank you, John. I'll bring in CNN Political Director David Chalian, Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, Chief Political Analyst Gloria Borger, and CNN Politics Senior Writer and Analyst Harry Enton. Thank you all for joining us. What did you say? Lemon and lime tonight?
Lemon and lime.
Lemon, lime, yeah.
Lemon.
So what are you looking for, David Chalian? You're the Political Director. What are you looking for tonight? Take us through it.
Well, as John was talking about, the first thing that I think all of us are looking at is to see, because of this unusual system in California, this top 2 primary system, do Democrats block themselves out of some districts that are key pickup opportunities for them in their overall quest to win the 23 seats they need to win the majority of the House of Representatives. And you got to remember, Don, that is the political story of 2018, the battle for control of the House of Representatives. And it is a real battle. And as John was saying, you look at these districts in California, the 7 districts that Hillary Clinton won that have a Republican in them, that's about 1/3 of the way. If you're adding up to get to 23, the Democrats see California as a place to get 1/3. It's a real treasure trove. But because of this system, we're looking to see in some districts, do Democrats not, because of all the enthusiasm out there and all the candidates that are on, do they block themselves out of some of these districts, and therefore these golden pickup opportunities are gone, and it complicates the math to the majority.
Can you imagine, Gloria, getting shut out of the districts that you actually had a really good chance of flipping?
Right. And the irony is that because you have only enthusiastic voters out there, I mean, this is ground zero for the resistance out in California. And the irony is that you have so many enthusiastic voters out there and so many enthusiastic candidates who have lined up to run that they're going to split the vote. And so, you know, we were joking about curb your enthusiasm. You don't want the Democrats to curb their enthusiasm, but in California, when the party has tried to get involved a little bit and say to some people, you've got to get out of this race, or it's been it's touchy to do that when a national party says, for the greater good, we need this progressive to leave or that person to leave who's not getting any funding. And so it's very, very difficult for them.
It's interesting because I was thinking back to 2016. Remember, we had all of those, I think it was 17 Republicans who were up there on the stage. And didn't that happen with the anti-Trump Republicans? They sort of just canceled each other out, Dana?
That's a good analogy. You know, a lot of people look back and look at the math and say, had there been fewer non-Trump candidates, he wouldn't have been the nominee, wouldn't have been president. You know, you never know what exactly would have happened. It was a very anti-Washington year. Having said that, yes, this is, in California, as David and Gloria pointed out, this is such a unique system, a system that was intended, ironically, as a way to end gerrymandering, a way to, or get around gerrymandering, I should say, a way to make the extremes more moderate. And at least so far, because it's so unique and so complicated, that hasn't happened. Now, we're talking about, of the 7 districts that Hillary Clinton won in California, maybe two, maybe 3, where the the Democrat will be potentially shut out. That still leaves.
And maybe not.
And maybe not. And maybe not. But let's just say for the Democrats, worst case scenario is they're shut out of. that still leaves competitive districts for them. And that is still, from their perspective, a good time on the road to 23, especially when they're playing in competitive districts across the country. It should have been easy for them in a state like California, the ground zero for the resistance, and it makes it interesting and very confusing and complicated to watch this.
Just to make your point, 9 of the 10 California House districts rated as competitive by CNN are currently held by Republicans. 7 of those districts voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and then yet, possibility, we don't know that they could get shut out. This could be a big night for women, Harry.
Huge night for women.
Candidates.
Huge night. I mean, look at the gubernatorial candidates who we think are going to be favored in the fall that have won so far. Kay Ivey in Alabama. In Iowa, Kim Reynolds didn't even face competition. Kristi Noem in South Dakota, who was the most competitive race, and she's won. Go to New Mexico, the Democratic candidate there, looking back-to-back women candidates. And then in congressional races as well, both not only just in California, but in New Jersey. Iowa, 2 women have won. Overwhelmingly won there on the Democratic side. In fact, so far in Democratic primaries, when there's been an open seat, women have been winning about 70% of them. That may go up after tonight.
Interesting. I feel like Wolf Blitzer now because I have a major projection. And on election night, CNN projects that Gavin Newsom will claim one of the top 2 spots in the California gubernatorial election, advancing the November general election.
Well, and that's not a surprise. He's been running way ahead in the polls, but I think the real question is who's going to be the number 2? Are you going to have 2 Democratic candidates?
Here we go.
Right. Are you going to have 2 Democratic candidates facing off each other? Or, and remember, the president endorsed John Cox, the Republican, and kind of talked him up. Or are you going to have a Democrat and a Republican facing off? If you have 2 Democrats facing off each other, the Republicans then say, well, that's a problem for us because it doesn't motivate our voters to come out when they know that there's going to be a Democrat winning that important race anyway.
I know it's early, but we should just note with about 9% of the precincts reporting, John Cox, the Republican that Donald Trump has been tweeting about and trying to nudge into the November election, is indeed significantly ahead of Antonio Villaraigosa at the moment. It is very early. We also know there were some complications in LA that Antonio Villaraigosa is very concerned that is impacting a huge swath of his voters that may have been forced to fill out provisional ballots. So there's going to be a lot more counting beyond tonight to determine who gets
but
that
I
second
also
slot.
think that even big picture, if John Cox does become the second candidate and they run, that will obviously be a traditional general election face-off. On the Senate side, though, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a Republican in the general election, just like you saw 2 years ago when Kamala Harris ran against Congresswoman Sanchez. So if you kind of take a step back, I know we've been talking a lot about the districts in and around Orange County or in Southern California where a Democrat will not be running. Big picture, the state of California, Republicans are in deep trouble. In very deep trouble. As one Republican from there said to me earlier today, they're not extinct, but they're an endangered species. It really is a remarkable thing to think. California is a huge state, and it also speaks to where the country is going.
It's kind of its own
with
country.
regard to it is.
Its own economy.
It is. It's the largest economy in the world. But it also speaks to where the country is going when you talk about the coasts, and when you talk about the middle. I mean, that has obviously been a trend that we've seen for days, but it is even more solidified, or it's illustrated with the kind of election we're having
So
today.
considering what's happening, though, with this jungle primary, can you still consider this California as a bellwether to what could happen come November? Because it's a state that opposes a lot of Trump's policies, right?
Yeah.
He's got to be watching this really closely.
It's a liberal. Yeah. I think you'd agree with me.
It's a very liberal state.
Very liberal.
It's a very liberal state. I mean, the governor's race, you have 27 candidates competing. I know that because I read that somewhere. I didn't count them, but 27 candidates competing. So it's a different system. It's a different state. But what it does measure, I think, is enthusiasm.
Right.
And of course, Democrats are going to be enthusiastic in California, but I do think we can sort of say, from looking at that and the number of people competing and the primaries we've looked at so far this early election season, we've seen that enthusiasm on the Democratic side.
I'm just wondering if the anti-Trump fervor is going to backfire for Democrats. I mean, it could happen here. We shall see. So stick around, everyone. We're going to see you in just a minute. When we come back, Democrats hoping to energize voters with their anti-Trump message, but could that actually work against them in California? We're going to go live to one of the hardest fought races in the state. We'll be right back. Here's the breaking news. It's election night, the biggest primary night so far in 2018. 8 states across the country holding elections, but California and its jungle primary could be the key to all of it. And we may see the morning sunshine before actually we know the results here. So we shall see. CNN senior national correspondent Kyung Law is in Newport Beach, California for us. Kyung, hello to you. You're at a watch party for one of the Democrats who might get shut out because of California's jungle primary. Again, big consequences for November's midterms. What can you tell us?
This is California 48. This is Dana Rohrabacher's district, and this is a district that Democrats desperately want to pick up. We're at a watch party for Hans Kirsty because some of the supporters, they have their drinks. They are anticipating that it could be a while, but when the very first initial results came down, they were looking here at his screen, and he was surrounded by supporters as he stood right about here, and he said, "We are not the Democratic spoilers." That's the hope. The very reality here, Don, is that Kirsted could end up canceling out the other Democrat, that the two basically split the Democratic vote. That is the nightmare scenario for national Democrats, and then they would be completely shut out of November. But again, it is early in the evening. Right now, Dana Rohrabacher in the initial count is leading. Number 2 is Hans Kirsted. And so for these supporters, even though it is still very early, they are optimistic and they are hoping that a Democrat will get through in California 48 and that nightmare scenario will not come to fruition. Don?
All right, Kyung, thank you. Very noisy headquarters there. Thank you. Tell us who's number 2.
It's right now a Democrat, but it's a very, very tight race in the 48th. In fact, I think of all the races where Democrats may get shut out, that one has the highest probability at this point.
Because?
Because it's a very, very close race. I mean, there it is on the screen right now. I mean, if you look at the 48th versus the 49th versus the 39th, which are the 3 big possibilities, the race right now is closest in the 48th. As it's, what is that, 300 votes?
And it's a conservative district. It's a Republican district, and the Republican running to run against Rohrabacher is well known.
Yeah.
He's well known. He's got a high name ID, and this is not a district that tends to. There hasn't been a Democratic bench there.
You're
So
talking
the
about
Democrats
Scott Baugh there.
Scott Baugh.
Yeah, who the national Republicans also were pouring money into this race to support both Rohrabacher and Baugh because they're trying to block out a Democrat.
Exactly.
And Harry is right. I mean, you saw the numbers there, Don. It's really close. We're scrolling the numbers across the bottom of our screen all night long. Everyone watching at home should stay tuned to this district because this is going to be the one probably that is most likely to have a potential of a.
All right, stand by. More analysis. I need to get to Gloria. I'll let you be the first to talk on the other side. I got to get to John King, though. John's at the magic wall. John, I understand that you have some information about governors. Is that correct?
Yeah, let's look at the governor's race. And before we do, these are the House districts. Just a reminder, you're having this conversation, just how big California is, how complicated California is, how diverse California is. And when it comes to campaigns, look at all those TV markets, how expensive California is. Let me go to the governor's race. You mentioned earlier, Gavin Newsom, CNN is now confident projecting he will advance to the November election. The big question is, will his opponent be a Democrat or a Republican? You see all the red in here? This is the more conservative part of the state. You get away from the coast. John Cox running up a pretty good total right now. I just want to caution, Don, we're at 33%, so about a third of the vote. But David Chalian was talking earlier. There's the problem down in Los Angeles. That's where former Mayor Villaraigosa is from. But look at this, 33%, almost 34% for Gavin Newsom. Then a Republican there, a Republican running third. Here's the big question mark. Does that hold? Does Anthony Villaraigosa stay third or fourth place? If that's the case, you get a more traditional race. Newsom would be favored. Or when the votes come in down here, you see a lot of gray, and you also are just waiting. I just want to hit Los Angeles just to see where we are. Just 5% of the vote in Los Angeles. That's Villaraigosa's base. So a ways to go.
Hey, John,
but a reminder again of the jungle primary. Sure thing, Don.
Yeah, we can call Cox now. You want to talk about that?
There you go. Well, that is very significant. Number one, Gavin Newsom will be heavily favored. Jerry Brown is the incumbent governor. California is a blue state. But Dana and Gloria were talking about this earlier. Why is it important that you have John Cox as number 2? Give Republicans a reason to come out and vote. If you have 2 Democrats in the governor's race, 2 Democrats in the Senate race, what is the enticement for Republicans to come out? They might care about the local race. Maybe there's a mayor's race. Maybe they're in a good congressional district. But if you don't have Republican candidates in the statewide races, it really sucks the energy out of the party. It's a blue state to begin with. And again, if you look at the Democrats, they think they can get 6 or 7 if the wave gets big again, 8 House districts out of California. What does that have to do with the governor's race? If no one's coming out to play on the Republican side, it affects turnout throughout the state. So it is very important for a decimated California Republican Party to at least have a candidate in a statewide race. That is progress, if you will. They have a long way to go, but if that's the case, we're now projecting John Cox as that, a Democrat. It's a big blow to Antonio Villaraigosa, who thought this was his political comeback campaign, and it's a big win for the California Republican Party just to have a candidate. Gavin Newsom will be heavily favored.
Thank you very much, Mr. John King. We'll get back to you when we need more information. We always go back to Mr. John King. Let's bring the panel back in. Gloria, as John said, this is a more traditional governor's race now, a Democrat and a Republican.
It is, but I bet they're really happy at the White House right now because the president went, tweeted, I think multiple times
about a week ago?
About John Cox. He clearly didn't want a Democrat versus a Democrat, even though Newsom will obviously be favored. As John was just saying, this means some Republicans are going to come out and vote because they've got a real viable candidate. And so that's what the White House wants, particularly for down ticket, other races, House races. They want to get their voters out, and this is one way to do it because you're likely to have a Senate race, as Dana was saying, between 2 Democrats.
And it's also it's a win for the president.
Absolutely.
There's no question. And
Absolutely.
for other top Republicans in the state who decided that they were going to do what Democrats have not been able to do, which is rally around 1 or 2 candidates or 1 candidate in these key districts. Now, they have an embarrassment of riches, they argue, because they have so many good candidates, they have so much enthusiasm. On the Republican side, it could have gone a different way, but the fact of the matter is they organized themselves, starting at the top with the President of the United States, to say, this is our guy. The House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, whose district is in California, of course, he did the same thing. And it's very, you can't underscore enough, I think, how important this is for the Republicans in this state.
Harry, still, though, Gavin Newsom is the favorite, right?
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom is clearly the favorite. The early polls have him well ahead. But talk about the reverse incentives of the top 2 system, because Gavin Newsom wanted to face John Cox in the fall. He did not want Antonio Villaraigosa in the general election with him. And so you had a different set of beliefs or priors. Democrats wanted Villaraigosa, but Newsom himself is very, very happy this evening.
Why didn't he want?
Because that was a shot he could lose that. There's just very little shot that he can
consolidates
lose
the Democrats.
Exactly. He will get that Democratic vote large in California.
I want to ask you about this, David, because the former President Bill Clinton, as you know, has been out and about and stirring some controversy. He was on Stephen Colbert last night, and he was still cleaning up, really, his recent answer about Monica Lewinsky. So my question is, how many Democrats in the fall want to campaign with him after all of this? Here it is right here.
Here's what I want to say. It wasn't my finest hour, but the important thing is that was a very painful thing that happened 20 years ago, and I apologize to my family, to Monica Lewinsky and her family, to the American people. I meant it then, I meant it now. I've had to live with the consequences every day since. And I still believe this Me Too movement is long overdue, necessary, and should be supported.
What do you think?
So this is the 2nd day in a row of cleanup after the initial interview aired on the Today Show yesterday morning. He seems to be getting the cleanup right a bit more, but that doesn't change your political question, Don, which is the fact that Bill Clinton obviously can still go out and raise a lot of money. But when you talk to people who talk to him a lot, and you talk to Democratic candidates out there, he is not on the top of Democratic candidates' request list of bring in Bill Clinton to my district, because he is of another era, and his past is very complicated to explain away, which he has trouble doing in this Me Too moment and where we are now as a culture. And so In addition, obviously, Hillary Clinton's loss to Donald Trump in 2016 has left a sour taste for some Democrats as well, especially in tough red districts. So here's the deal. Bill Clinton, you're going to see him on the campaign trail. I don't want to suggest for a moment that he has been shunned from the Democratic Party.
I'm going to agree with you, and I'll tell you why, but go on.
But you are not going to see him campaigning at the level that we have seen him do in previous election cycles. He will not be requested as much.
Let me tell you why I think that you're right, and I think he might be requested. I think sometimes we're too close to it. And again, this is just devil's advocate. As I'm on the streets of New York City, which is very liberal, right? And then you read the Twitter feed.
The heartland.
Why are you guys reporting on Bill Clinton? Happened 20 years ago. Why don't you focus on what's happening in the White House right now? This has already been litigated. It's 20 years old. That's not me saying that. That's what I'm hearing from people. From Democrats. I don't ask them what they are, but they'll tell me that. Why are you guys focused on that? We've dealt with it. He paid the price. And so let's move on. What about the guy in the White House right now? That's what I'm hearing.
But those are Democrats who are
I know. That's what I agree with you.
And if and obviously they're saying, we don't want to raise that issue because it helps Donald Trump with all of his problems. Right. Stormy Daniels and everything else. I want to point out that Bill Clinton's wife didn't use him very much on the campaign trail during the last election.
Especially towards the end, because in the beginning he screwed up a lot. Remember?
Well, he did
because Donald Trump was weaponizing his past.
Right.
And
exactly, and Republicans can do that again. And so I don't think he'll be used except in real places where. Maybe New York, where he can be, he can really be a help. But if people had a choice, for example, between, say, Barack Obama, former president, and Bill Clinton, a former president.
Barack Obama. Yeah, quickly, please.
Bill Clinton's just not very popular. His favorable ratings are down in the 40s. Outside of New York, I wouldn't have him on the campaign trail.
Very interesting. All right, stick around. When we come back, more results in the biggest primary night of 2018. Will Democrats ride a blue wave, and what will all of this mean in November? We're going to discuss that right after this. So here's breaking tonight. Results coming in from races across the country on the biggest primary night of the year. John King back to read the tea leaves for us. I said when we wanted more information, we always go back to John King, and here we are. So, John, how could tonight's results impact the Democrats' chances of taking back the House?
If there's a big, giant blue wave, tonight's not a big deal, Don. If there's a medium blue wave, or if the blue wave turns into a blue ripple, tonight could be critical to the math in the end. Why? One of our questions. Will the Democrats have a candidate against Republican incumbent Jeff Denham? Why does that matter? Hillary Clinton carried this district. Democrats in a blue year can get it. It's gettable. Will they have a candidate? Right now they do, but only 36% of the vote in. Unclear if they'll have a candidate. That's one of the races where Democrats, if they get locked out, it hurts their chances. Here's another one down here, not Duncan Hunter, but let me move over to this race here. Diane Harkey is the Republican leading in what is now Darrell Iss's district. Again, Hillary Clinton won this district. Democrats can get it if it's a blue year. Will they have a candidate? Right now they do, but only 13% of the vote in. They have a chance, a possibility they get locked out here because call it rational exuberance. So many Democrats are coming out to run in these races, they may cancel each other out. Here's the third district. Dana Rohrabacher, again, vulnerable Republican, Clinton district. Democrat in second right now, but it's very close. You go through, you see some Republicans, but also a lot of Democrats. Can they vote out? Why does this matter? Let me come over here for a minute. Don, give me a sec to go through this. This is the current state of play. Republican majority 240, Democrats at 195. These are the races where we know the lines are drawn, solid Democrats, solid Republican districts. We're pretty sure these are going to stay the same. Then you get into your key races, your competitive races across the country right now, right? 15 of them Democratic districts. Republicans have a lot more districts where they are vulnerable. These are key races. They're in play. So can Democrats get the majority? Well, let's start in the north, right up here. A lot of targets. 5 districts in Minnesota, 4 in Illinois, 5 in Michigan. If it's a big blue wave, Democrats are going to pick up some seats here. Let's come back to the map and go over to the East Coast. A lot of targets in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. If it's a big blue wave, Democrats are going to get 8, 10, 12, maybe even more here. California won't matter. If it's a big blue wave. Again, some more opportunities down here in Florida and Texas. Democrats could pick up a couple here, could pick up more than a couple there if there's a blue wave. But if there isn't, what if it's a modest Democratic year and they only get 1 or 2 of these? They don't get any of these or they get 1 or 2. They've only done so-so up in the Midwest and the Northeast. You get out to California and the Democrats are, say, plus 17, plus 18. They need plus 23. Then these districts out in California become absolutely critical. 10 districts we view as competitive. Only one is a Democrat. 9 Republican districts in play. 7 of these 9, again, carried by Hillary Clinton. What if the Democrats don't have candidates in 3 of these districts, 4 of these districts, because of the jungle primary tonight? If there's a big blue wave, again, it won't matter. The House will already be gone, and this will be about the margins. If we get to the West Coast and Democrats are plus 17 or 18, and they get locked out of 3 or 4 of these districts tonight, that's going to matter.
John King at the Magic Wall with all the information. John, thank you. When we come back, more results on the biggest primary night of the year so far and what it all could mean come November. Breaking news, more results coming in on the biggest primary night of the year so far. California could be the key tonight. I want to bring in CNN national political reporter Maeve Reston and CNN political analyst Nathan Gonzalez. He is the editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Good evening to both of you. Maeve, I want you to get your new reporting on a printing error that left over 100,000 voters off the rosters in LA. What's going on?
So this is very mysterious, Don, but basically what happened is that a lot of voters showed up at the polls today in Los Angeles County, which is the most populous county in the state, and couldn't find their name on the roster. Now, when that happens, voters are supposed to be given a provisional ballot by the poll workers. But in some cases, that didn't happen. And so the county registrar started to get all kinds of complaints. They discovered that because of this random printing error, that 118,000 voters, which is a lot of votes, were left off the roster. And so this caused widespread confusion today. Why it could really matter is because of one of those very tight congressional races that you're talking about. That's in California's 39th district. That's a race that will be decided probably in the coming days and weeks, potentially, because it's so tight. There's a scenario there where Democrats could get locked out. And a lot of voters in that district live in Los Angeles County. It's a district that touches 3 counties, Orange County, Los Angeles County, and San Bernardino County. So we're waiting to see how many people this affected and whether it affects the results in that district and whether there could be a possible recount, potentially.
Yeah, that's the question. Could there be a possible recount if the races are close?
Well, I mean, it depends on how many people were, quote unquote, turned away, whether they could prove that to a judge, whether there are grounds for a legal challenge. But what is clear is that it's going to take a long time to count these provisional ballots. And that was a race where, if you're talking about a couple of hundred votes, there is potential for the candidates who don't win to challenge the results.
So, Nathan, Democrats need a 23-seat net gain to regain control of the House. What are the chances as of now?
Well, I think Democrats had a great chance of winning the majority before tonight's primaries. I think no matter what happens in the primaries tonight, it's still going to have a good chance. I mean, when you just look at history is on the Democrat side. You have a polarizing president. Midterms are traditionally bad for the president's party. So it is Democrats still have an opportunity. It would be a big disappointment if Democrats get locked out of 1 or 2 congressional races here in California. But as John just pointed out, I would say there are at least 65, 70 Democratic takeover opportunities around the country. If a couple of them are off the table, there are still enough seats in play for Democrats to get what they need in order to win back the House.
So, Maeve, we are learning tonight that the White House is talking about applying a loyalty test to determine which Republicans President Trump will endorse in the midterms. Have you ever heard of anything like this?
I mean, it's something new every day with President Trump, right? The thing that's really interesting about it is that a lot of these Republicans, particularly in some of these districts here in California, really might not want President Trump getting involved in their races at all. You look at someone like Jeff Denham or David Valadao. They are in districts with a lot of Democrats, a lot of independents who are not happy with President Trump. And so in some of those races, they were trying to figure out, what they should be saying about Trump's policy on immigration or his rhetoric, for example. That's a big problem for them. So if there is a loyalty test, certainly that could be a factor for some Republicans around the country, but might not be an issue for California Republicans here.
A senior White House official said that Trump's political team is scrutinizing when each Republican who wants the president's support got on board with his candidacy in 2016. Of course, I mean, this comes back always to 2016. But I've got to ask you, Nathan, the question is, will the president's support actually help Republicans?
Well, I think it depends on the state and it depends on the race. I think when we're talking about the fight for the Senate, I think that President Trump could be an asset because Republicans need to defeat Democratic senators in states where the president did well. When we're talking about the House, it's a little bit different. As Maeve was pointing out, there are these districts that Hillary Clinton carried, the Republicans are currently representing, and that makes it more difficult. But in general, I think these Republican candidates and Republican members of Congress are in a tough spot because they need a coalition of the president's supporters and people who don't like the president in order to win re-election. I don't think it's an either or. They need to figure out a way to get both. And the president can be helpful for Republicans by turning out his loyal supporters. We're talking about loyal Republicans, loyal to the president, who maybe think that Republicans on the Hill aren't doing a good enough job. They might think that Republicans on the Hill are blocking the president's agenda. And so if those voters don't turn out in the midterm elections, Republicans are going to suffer heavy losses.
So let's talk about some of the supporters. Let's have a poll here, because this is according to a new CNN poll. The president is just 34% support from women. He's got 21% support from non-whites. Will numbers like these factor into whether or not Republicans push for Trump's endorsement, Nathan?
Well, there's those numbers among the general election, but we have to remember that the president is the most popular Republican within the Republican Party right now. And so, right now we have Republicans trying to work their way through primaries and nominating processes, but they also have to keep the president's supporters in order to win. But if the Republican Party is alienating large groups of voters and independents are swinging toward Democrats, then that's going to be problematic, and that's probably enough for Democrats to win back the House.
All right. Thank you both very much. I appreciate it, Nathan and Maeve. And when we come back, John King has an update on a key Senate race in Montana. We've got news tonight on a key Senate race in Montana. I want to bring in John King. John's at the Magic Wall. This is a race the president has made a personal mission, right?
Yes, he has. Remember, Democratic incumbent Jon Tester, he's the one who used the Candyman label against Dr. Ronny Jackson back when Dr. Jackson was the president's pick to lead the VA. Jon Tester saying he was accused, among other things, of being too loose with prescription drugs. The White House doctor. This is the state of Montana tonight. We talked about all those Democrats running out in California. Well, you have 4 accomplished Republicans running for the Senate nomination in Montana because they view this as an opportunity. They know Jon Tester's vulnerable. They know they'll get the president's help because he's interested in this race. At the moment, Don, look at this. This is a very close primary. The state auditor, Matt Rosendale, in first place right now. In second place, Russ Fagg. He's a former state legislator, a former state judge as well. A very close race right now, 3,200 votes separating the candidates at 63%. 2 other Republicans in the race as well, getting a fair share of the vote. So very competitive for obvious reasons. This is one of the states. This is a Trump state Democrat, if you will. There are 10 Democratic senators running for re-election this year in states the president carried. Jon Tester's in a state the president carried by more than 20 points. So Republicans view this as an opportunity. That's why you have so many good candidates running. Very close at the moment. This is one we're going to be watching. Once we get a Republican candidate, we currently lean this race Democratic because Tester is a proven candidate in the state. But once we get a Republican nominee, we'll look at the polling. Republicans would very much like to turn that into one of the yellow toss-up states, and they think by November, maybe they can lean it red. It's going to be one of the fun ones between now and November.
Mr. King, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I want to turn now to the White House aide who made a very cruel joke about Senator John McCain. She is no longer working there tonight. Joining me now is CNN political commentators Keith Boykin and Alice Stewart. This came as a surprise, and it wasn't a big announcement. So, Alice, I'm going to start with you. Good evening, both of you, or morning, depending on where you are. So let's start with the news that Kelly
John.
Sadler, that's her name, the press aide who joked about John McCain dying out at the White House, but not due to her McCain comment. The New York Times is reporting that Sadler was pushed out because of her constant fighting with the White House Director of Strategic Communications, Mercedes Schlapp, over who is responsible for some of the leaks. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you they're more concerned about leaks than some of the content that comes out of the White House, which is unfortunate. Look, let me just say this. I know Kelly Sadler, she's a good person, a very good person who said a very bad thing. And I'm actually quite surprised that she wasn't let go when the McCain comment came out because it was extremely hurtful and disparaging to someone who is a hero to this country. However, they made the decision to keep her and stand by her. But as we've seen time and time again, this White House is super concerned about leaks, as they should be, because there are a lot of them. But they seem to be more concerned about that than the content of the information that comes out of this, which I think is quite disturbing.
I think let's go through memory lane here, because there's always a videotape. So Sarah Sanders dodging questions after question about Kelly Sadler's comment on whether the White House would take any action.
Does she still have a job? I'm not going to comment on an internal staff meeting.
Does the White House not think that you need to condemn these remarks or comment?
Again, I'm not going to validate a leak one way or the other out of an internal staff meeting.
Are you saying that you didn't say this?
Again, I'm not going to validate a leak out of an internal staff meeting one way or the other.
Does Kelly Sadler still work at this White House?
Yes, she does.
Well, I mean, that was convenient. After a month, they've quietly let go.
Yeah, I mean, this is the White House that doesn't apologize for anything, and so it's not surprising that they wouldn't apologize for Kelly Sadler's remarks, and yet they, of course, wanted other people. They wanted Samantha Bee to apologize. They wanted Michelle Wolf to apologize. They wanted Colin Kaepernick and other African-American athletes to apologize for their behavior. I think there's an inconsistency that everybody can see, obviously, and the question is, when will the Republican Party finally start to hold the president accountable?
Yeah. I want to switch gears now. There's so much to talk about with you guys, especially Alice, because you're in Philadelphia. I had a beautiful shot of City Hall behind you, and I want to talk about this uproar about President Trump abruptly uninviting the Eagles to the White House. Sarah Sanders says that this was a political stunt, meaning from the Eagles. But as we reported, this is an issue the president views as something that could help him in the midterms. Isn't that kind of a political stunt?
It could be viewed by many as a political stunt on both sides. Look, clearly the president has been very consistent in where he stands on this issue. He clearly believes, and I support him in the notion that Americans across the country should stand for the national anthem and show support for our military and show support for our flag and show support for our country. That being said, I went to 7 Eagles games this year, and all of the players stood for the national anthem in all of the games, so it wasn't an issue with this Eagles team. So the problem that we had is some mixed messages, unfortunately, coming out of the White House, that sometimes some would say it was because of the national anthem, and sometimes the final statement was that the fact that the Eagles originally committed to having about 80 people come to the White House, and it ended up being just a handful and maybe the mascot and a water boy, which wouldn't have been very good optics for the president. That being said, sure, for the president, this is good for his base. They support him on this issue. They believe that he is right to stand by our military and the national anthem. And for him, this was a good way not only to throw red meat to his base, but also to get a jab at the NFL, which he has always loved to do because he wasn't welcomed into the NFL Boys Club.
Yeah, but political strategy, and this was from a deposition from Colin Kaepernick. It came out that he told one of the owners, like, this is very winning, strong issue for me. Tell everybody you can't win this one. This one lifts me. Is he using this controversy, which has to do with race, as a political?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, the guy doesn't even know the words "God Bless America." He doesn't remember when to put his hand over his heart when the national anthem is going on. He's not a patriot. He's a person who's using patriotism as a tool to manipulate his base, to keep them in this constant fueled up, ginned up, perpetual outrage. Clearly, this is the problem because Donald Trump has acted this way to be divisive toward our country, and no one is stopping him from doing this. That's the tragedy about this whole thing. When will someone actually hold the president accountable? That's the issue I'm faced with again and again. And Alice, I understand your point about you support the president's ideas about the national anthem, but we both know this was never about the national anthem. It was never about that. And Donald Trump is trying to conflate these issues to confuse his base.
Yeah, listen, I got to run, Alice. I would let you respond otherwise, but again, since he changed the narrative on this, lots of Americans do support him, and lots of Americans don't. It's about 50-50, really 49-47, which is really a statistical tie when it comes to that. So the country's really divided over this issue, and we're going to continue to see it play out. And as he said, as we've been told, through the midterm. Thank you both. I appreciate you joining us. That's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to see you right back here tomorrow. Have a good night.
I'm Chris Cuomo. Welcome to Primetime. So, why did the president cancel his meeting with the Eagles? Is he really trying to divide the country over freedom of speech just because it may help him politically? We've got former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci here. Does he see this as winning? Plus, President Trump's education secretary says the commission tasked with keeping your kids safe at school won't be looking into the role of guns. What? And Bill Clinton gets a do-over on the Monica Lewinsky question. What did he say this time? What do you say? Let's get after it. All right, let's call it the Eagle debacle. Facts first. The White House says the president is standing up for the national anthem. But not one single Eagle knelt in protest during the national anthem during the regular season. Not one. And yet, President Trump disinvited the whole team from coming to the White House today, had a Celebrating America ceremony instead, had military there and some alleged Eagle fans, some of whom we're told couldn't name the team's quarterback, and then accused the Eagles of pulling a political stunt. Another tangled web from the White House, another play at dividing the country. Maybe Anthony Scaramucci can help us figure out how this is good politics or good for the country. Former White House Communications Director, friend of show. Thank you for being with me earlier.
Congratulations on the show. Let's start with that. God bless.
Appreciate it.
Wish you great success.
So, do you like this move of disinviting the Eagles?
Well, I think you have to step back and look at the totality of the facts. And so I think you got to go back to the NFL owners' decision about what it meant to stand or kneel for the national anthem. And then I think what happened is some of the Eagles players, perhaps because of that decision, disaffected from the White House invitation. And so it appeared that there were 10 or possibly 15 Eagles that were going to show up at the White House versus 45 or 50 Eagles. And I think the president felt that that was probably too small of a quorum of Eagles, and it was probably a notion of symbolic protest as a result of the NFL owners' decision. And so the combination of those two things, the president made a decision to cancel the invitation and then to go with the celebration of the flag.
Right move? We know what he did. The question is why he did it, what he's trying to achieve.
So you're going to disagree with me perhaps on this, and I have said this publicly, and I don't mind saying it on your show. I have no problem with the peace and social justice movement and the protests of the NFL players. My problem consistently with that has been with the venue, Chris. They're being paid to be on the field. The NFL's super tied into our military. I've been to our air bases and our military support bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the troops love the NFL.
Right.
And so it is a little bit dishonorable to me personally, that they're kneeling. I think the president takes it that way. And so I have no problem protesting, find venues to do this. They can clearly, the NFL can work with the players outside of the arena.
No, I hear you.
And the stadium.
I've heard this before.
So
it's
that's
not
me.
an uncommon argument.
That's
right.
me.
You have the right
So-
to the opinion. This
Yeah.
is the president of the United States. And what he's saying is, I'm going to punish you if you have a different opinion. I'm going to disinvite you from the people's house. All right? That's not his house. There's no Trump on it in gold, embossed. He's saying, you don't come here. It is a move of division and isolation of a group of people that he has deemed unpatriotic.
Okay.
How is that presidential? How is that good for the country?
Okay, so again, he is the temporary occupant of that house. And so you have to give him some respect. If you've got 45 or 50 people and 35 of the 50 people disaffect from coming to the house.
People you've called, in general, sons of bitches who should not be in the country. Don't forget that.
Okay.
All right?
Well,
Which
look,
had obvious
you're
racial undertones.
You're a New
to people.
Yorker, and I'm a New Yorker, and sometimes we're prone to a little bit of embellishment, a little bit of hyperbole.
President of the United States, Anthony.
I understand that, but you have to understand how he got to be the President of the United States. He got there by practicing an unorthodox style, and he got there by explaining to the American people that the current shenanigans that go on Washington are not to their favor. And let me finish. And now 15, 16 months or 500 days later, he's actually done a very, very good job for the American people. But you're not going to agree with everything that he does, and you obviously don't agree with this decision
No.
today.
It's not about what I agree or don't agree with.
I'm
you have
telling
to
you that
scrutinize why he's doing it. You had to add another phrase, why he won. And, comma, he played to these types of divisions and tensions. We have reporting from the White House right now that he sees this as a winning issue for him. If he campaigns on this, he's saying one very simple thing. If you don't play American the way I say you should, you're not a patriot. You're an enemy. And that is good for this country.
Okay, you're not. Well, the way you're phrasing it, obviously, it's obviously not good for the
How
country.
do I have it wrong?
But you're phrasing it in a way that I think is incorrect.
Show me how, given this example,
So let me
with
just
the
tell you what I
facts.
think. Let me tell you what I think. The president is basically saying, I think the same thing I'm saying. Totally fine with the First Amendment, totally fine with your peaceful protests of things that you disagree with, whatever relates to peace and social justice. But in that venue, as it relates to the NFL and the relationship the NFL has with our military and the aura and the cultural symbol of the NFL, we want you to stand for
It's
the
not
anthem.
about how he feels about it. It's about what he says and does about it, Anthony. I am. You just said the same point, though, 3 times. I get that he doesn't like their venue.
I'm actually really trying to answer your question because he's not really trying to divide the country. What he's trying to do is actually unite the country around this idea that the flag is held sacred and that the flag, we should have an unconditional love for the country. As Lincoln said about the country, it's the last best hope for mankind. Every one of us has a generational immigration story. Every one of us has had an aspirational standard of success in the country. And so, yes, we've had problems. There's been the stain of slavery. There's been some levels of police brutality. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is way better than the other alternatives that are out there in the world. And all the president is saying is that we should have unconditional love for the flag, and we should support that together. And whatever our differences are, or wherever we need to protest, let's pick a different venue. I think that's unifying. You think that's dividing. And
I
so
think what you just said is basically
where we are.
unifying. But here's your problem, my friend. That's not what he's saying. He's saying if you don't address the flag the way I want you to, the flag is a symbol of freedom. The keystone freedom is freedom of speech and expression.
See, I don't think he's saying
But
that.
he's
though. We got to invite him on your show. Because I don't think he's saying that.
First
I think
of all,
he's saying,
the president is invited to come on the show whenever time he wants. It's an open offer. I've made it many times.
Probably not going to come on your show, Chris.
And what does that tell you, by the way? Okay? Look, if he wants to duck questions, that's fine, but we still have to scrutinize actions. You can't tell me it's unifying. Listen, he's the president of the United States. Being irritated is part of the job. Dealing with hard questions is part of the job. He has taken a different path. But Anthony, here's what I'm saying.
I don't disagree with any of that. I've said to the president personally to expand his opportunity set and go on as many networks as possible.
Yeah, that was your strategy.
He is a television star.
He is.
And he has got an unbelievable force of his personality. He can answer any tough question. He can handle any situation.
And yet he won't.
And he has a point of view. Well, maybe he will. Maybe there's an evolution.
It's an open invitation, but let's
maybe
get
there's
back
an evolution
to
of that process.
Let's deal with the future in the future. Today, you said he's trying to unify. I don't understand that on the facts.
Okay.
How is it unifying to say, if you don't honor the flag and exercise your freedom of speech the way I like, you are a son of a bitch and should get out of the country, and I will disinvite you.
Okay, because now you're being unfair because you're relating to that off-the-cuff interview outside the MS-13 meeting where he was cuffing it, as he's sometimes prone to do, and he doesn't want the people out of the country.
He's tweeted about it. He said it multiple times.
What he really
just
wants is people to have an unconditional love for the flag and to recognize the symbol that represents for all of us. And on a Memorial Day or on a Veterans Remembrance Day or when you see the painful sacrifice that people have made and you walk the halls of Walter Reed Hospital and the people that have fought and died or been injured or wounded for that flag and the concept of that freedom that we're all benefiting from, all the president is saying, hey, listen, have an unconditional love for the country, salute the flag, let's protest in different venues away from the sacredness of the flag.
The unconditional love for this country is expressed in our freedom and our respect of tolerance.
But if you're on the job and you're getting a wage, I don't know about you.
You ask veterans how they feel about what's going on here, and you will see that there is no clear majority of them saying we hate that these guys kneel and protest.
You're on the payroll
Many of them
here,
say they fought for this.
But you're on the payroll here at CNN. Are you going to enter into a peace and social justice movement here at CNN without the consent of your employer? I mean, you're on the payroll, you're getting paid to do this show right now.
That's about the relationship between the player and the NFL.
Okay.
It's not about the president of the United States who says, hey, I heard Cuomo decided to form his kind of protest. I don't like it. I think he's a bad guy. He should be out of the country. He's not American, and he's an opponent to the president.
But again, I
think that's okay?
No, but I think you're now silly puttying the story, and you're stretching it to fit that narrative.
I haven't moved it beyond one established fact.
Let me rephrase that. Let me give you a better metaphor. It's Laffy Taffy. You're stretching the story, and you're converting it to fit a narrative that isn't accurate. What is accurate is you're on the field, You
Right.
represent the NFL. You're tied into our military. You're a cultural totem for our society. Show some love and respect for the flag.
That's your opinion.
Many people died over that.
That's your opinion.
Well, that's also the NFL owners' opinion now, right?
That's right. And
Okay,
they created their
that's
own
fine.
rules, and Trump
So,
says
but
they're
you're-
not
but
good
you're-
enough,
but you're
and then he
eliminating-
disinvites them from the
You're
White House.
eliminating some facts.
I'm not
to fit
eliminating
your
a
narrative.
single fact.
No, here's the elimination of fact that we're leaving out. They decided, maybe 35 of them, maybe 40 of them, I don't know the exact number, not to show up at the White House.
Do they have the right to
decided
do that?
They do, but then why doesn't the president have the right to say, okay, we don't have a full quorum of Philadelphia Eagles. You guys are having a protest related to
Right.
this. I don't want the news cycle. Of course, we're doing it right now on your show.
Because of
I
how
don't
we
want,
handled
I
it,
don't want the news cycle to be about this. I'm going to have a peaceful celebration
I'm
of the
going
flag
to disinvite you,
in,
and I'm going
in my
to
backyard,
accuse
which
you
I
of-
temporarily reside in.
I'm going to attack you, and I'm going to disinvite you. And here's the thing, and we're going to talk about this in a larger way. Does this president ever have to be the better man, in your opinion? Does he ever have to rise above any slight, any
so here's-
perceived indignity? Ever? Does he ever have to be better?
Here's the problem. I'm going to answer that question in a way that's going to surprise you. I'm going to say, of course he does.
When has he?
Well, let me just finish. But here's the problem with the whole narrative, okay? He's taking in 90% enemy incoming, constant barrage of attacks, constant barrage of criticisms. We don't give him credit for anything. And he's sitting there at peace on the North Korean peninsula. He's solving
getting way ahead of us, but let's hope you're right.
He's in the process of solving the situation in the Middle East. The economy's
That
rising.
again is wild, ambitious,
Okay, so
and
let's talk
optimistic
about
from where we are right
let's
now.
talk about real economic data. Okay, we have the lowest African American, Hispanic unemployment in the history of
But you
those
understand
numbers.
what you're doing. You're saying because he's doing good things,
No,
it is
no.
okay
I'm not
if he
saying
does
that.
bad things,
I'm
and it's
not saying
okay if
that.
he
I'm
tries to
saying
divide the
that
country. I don't get
He's
it.
counterpunching against a very heavy onslaught of negative incoming that's coming from the
He
mainstream
gets
media.
peace on the peninsula. He will get it. I said when the first word of it came out, I said, this is a huge if, but if it happens, this is the stuff of a Nobel Peace
Well,
Prize.
can I get
When
invited back on that
when we-
night?
When we talk,
Yeah,
God willing, it happens.
God
Who doesn't
willing. I
want
wanna
peace?
get-
The problem
I wanna
is
get
this.
invited back on that night.
This is a man in an administration that does what you're doing right now. It doesn't matter what we do wrong. Look what we do right. And if
Didn't
we
say
do
that.
anything wrong,
See-
other people do
you
things
see, that-
wrong. And
that-
if you say we
okay,
do something
with all due
wrong,
respect,
you're getting
this
it
is
wrong,
your
and
second,
it's fake
this
news.
is the second night on the show, so be super respectful to you. But what you're saying right now is totally unfair to what I am saying. You're asking me, you said, number one, should the president be a better person? I said, yes. He's got to raise to a higher ground and be a better person. Why is he having a hard time doing that in situations like this? And then I answered it. I said, he's having a hard time doing it in situations like this because he's getting a 90% incoming of negativity from the media, and no one's giving him any
But
credit
I think it's about
for
something
the
else.
success.
I think it's about a relationship with the truth. And I think we see it here, where he's saying it's about the anthem. The
good news
Eagles.
is the university still like you. They're going to give you the PhD in psychiatry.
Listen.
I'm not getting the PhD in
Well,
psychiatry.
truth isn't
Chris.
about psychiatry. It's about
No, you're
fact
trying to
and
explain his
respect
personality and his
thereof. It's not
behavior.
about personality. It's about whether he tells the truth,
don't-
Anthony. I don't care what about his personality. I care about whether he tells the truth to the American people on the matters that
You're-
are important.
Okay, but you're-
and that's not psychology.
You're like everybody else now in the media. Oh, the president's a liar. The president's a liar.
When you
But-
lie,
but
why
here's-
shouldn't you be called a liar?
But because there's different styles of communication, Chris.
No, lying is
there
not a style of
there is.
communication.
There's
Anthony,
different
please.
styles of communication. 63.5 million people voted for him because they get the gist of what he's
No,
talking about.
I think they voted for him despite what they would call in their own lives lying. I think if you ask people, if you say that the Eagles are disinvited because of how they protested during the anthem, and not one of them kneeled in protest during the anthem, is that telling the truth?
But then
no,
again,
it's not.
that's
It's a
hate-
lie.
That's a little bit of gaslighting because you're talking about last year's NFL. They didn't protest, but I'm talking about the decision that was made by the NFL owners, and then ultimately after that decision, 35 or so of them defected from the invitation to the
They
White
say
House.
they defected because they don't like Trump. They think he's
Okay.
misogynistic and a liar and bad for the country. That's why LeBron
guess
James
what?
just said this. Put up the LeBron James sound.
Okay, we're going to go to LeBron now.
Well, he matters, right?
It's typical of him. I mean, I'm not surprised. I know no matter who wins this series, no one's invited anyways. It won't be Golden State or Cleveland going.
Message that black athletes have received from the President of the
so
United States.
I would-
You said
I
during
would-
the clip, hold on, because it was important context.
Okay, yeah.
You said, I'm not the one who told them to shut up and dribble. That was
I
your friend
respect-
over at Fox.
I respect
Fox did
his,
something else.
I respect his right.
Right. It's nice.
to
It's nice to
speak,
hear
and I
something.
respect right to say what's on his mind at a press conference. He has that right. But you can't say at the same time, if he's saying that, the president doesn't have a right too. Okay, you have to say
it's about
there's
doing
symmetry.
it's not just about having.
Here's
Not
what I
how
would
you
say.
use your rights. It's
But
about doing what's right.
Here's what I would say, because I
Yes.
like calling balls and strikes fairly. If LeBron James is saying that, and Stephon Curry is saying that,
And their coach is saying it too.
and there is a problem of discontent in the United States. The president, okay, before he was president, was a unifying person. He had great relationships with the rap community. He got great relationships with NFL athletes and African American athletes. Let's put it
Don't
back
forget
together.
the Central Park Five.
Okay, we're going to go back 30 years.
Well, does that matter?
Okay,
That
but-
was
but
before
you-
the
okay, but
presidency.
now we're going back 30 years. I'm trying to say something.
Does it matter or no,
I'm actually
Anthony?
giving him. It's his second night on the air. I'm trying to give him
Come on,
I'm trying to give him something
Come on,
here.
though, man.
You're not.
Listen,
You're
how
not.
can
You're
you
really not being
unify
fair.
with what he did with the Central Park Five, with what he did with birtherism
Okay,
and
so
Obama? How
here-
can you call
so
him a
here-
unifier?
So here's what happens, okay? And maybe this will never happen to you. Maybe you'll be smart enough never to run for office. But if you do run for office, they're going to examine every syllable and every element of your life. And maybe you're a better person than Donald Trump, and maybe you'll come out more perfect than him. But here's what I know about him and everybody else, whether it's Bill Clinton or you pick the president or the political leader, they're flawed people.
Everybody
They
is
have
flawed.
they have
I
an
am probably
they have an
more
imperfection.
flawed than most.
This
but
is
that is
about
not
getting
an excuse
things. But
for
this
what
is
you
about
do as president. You still
Hey,
have
Chris,
to be judged.
This is about getting things right. The American people, Warren Buffett said something that I always apply in investing. I'd rather be roughly right than precisely wrong. The American people have looked at the president. They voted for him. He said he's going to get most things roughly right as opposed to precisely
First of
wrong.
all, he didn't get a majority
you-
of the
you
country.
don't-
He's underwater with his ratings.
Only,
I think this
only reason why he didn't get a
divisiveness
majority
is
of
a
the
big
country
reason.
is because that wasn't his strategy. He looked at the playing field.
Oh, yeah, I know. That was a little bit hindsight, okay? Nobody ever said that during the election, that we have this interest. We're going to lose the money. We're going to win
I don't
anyway.
know. I was
I
on.
don't remember
I was
that
on-
ever being said.
I was on the
covered that whole
campaign. I remember
But
going
look,
back and forth to
I wanna-
Wisconsin, thinking that we needed to win
I want to
Wisconsin.
check a couple more boxes.
Team didn't go to Wisconsin.
Look,
ahead.
they went. They didn't go. Usually, look, they made mistakes in their
Hillary
campaign.
Clinton did
but
not
that's
go to
about going
Wisconsin
back
after
to
she
something
was
that's no
nominated.
longer
Secretary
relevant.
Clinton did not go.
He's the president. All
He's the
right.
president. Give him a
Truth
break.
matters. We agree on that.
My
right?
message to the president, assuming that he hate watches your show, and perhaps he does, God willing, my message to him is, hey, you're a healing sort of guy. You can unite this. You can figure it out. You're a very good strategist. Take a step back. If Stephon Curry and LeBron James and a large group of the Philadelphia Eagles are saying the same thing, meet them in the middle. Let's put it back together.
Right. And
that would be my message to the president.
Strong message.
Whether I was in the White House or on your television show.
And remember, it's not just the bold-faced names. You have a huge fraction of the African American community in this country
There's
that
13%
feels
of the
isolated.
population is African American. We gotta put the country together. We gotta bring
And
the
this is
country
not
together.
a way to do it. But
He
truth-
would also say, though, listen, my economic policies are really people. We got the lowest rates of
But
unemployment
what you say
in those communities.
about culture and who matters and why they matter and what freedom is matters as well. And truth matters most. Kelly Sadler is let go today.
Yeah.
All right.
Disappointed
When
in that.
she said what she said about John McCain, the joke about, well, he's going to, die anyway. Why does he matter in this?
Okay.
The White House never came out and said that was wrong. They said this is an internal matter.
Okay.
They then get rid of her.
Right.
It comes out. They still don't say what she said was wrong. Now we find out the reason she was fired is not because of what she said about John McCain. It's because she reportedly said that Mercedes Schlapp was the leaker, and they fired her over that.
Okay.
You respect all that?
Well, let me just say a couple things about Kelly Sadler. Okay, she was a very hardworking person. She was extremely loyal to the president. There are factions inside that communication team that have been pea shooting at each other since the day they joined the communications team, and it required real leadership to knit that team together and to get back where a corporate merger would go down. And since that did not happen, faction on the right and faction on the left were shooting at each other, and someone had it out for Kelly Sadler because that was a sorry joke. It's an unforgivable statement. I'm not here suggesting the statement was okay, but I am suggesting, as somebody that's run a pretty decent corporation, that when you're sitting inside the inner sanctum and somebody says something like that, to run outside the sanctum and to rat on that person, I think that's a terrible thing to do to the person.
Only
Okay?
difference is
Hold on a
not a
second.
private concern. White House, they work for the people. This is about America's standards.
Hold on a second. Yes, but
Last
somebody
word
could,
to you.
but somebody could have simply said, "Hey, bad thing to say. Let's drop it right here." But they had it out for her, so they got to go outside, get their cell phone, and anonymously rat on. Why not do what I do? Say, hey, this is how I feel about the situation. I dislike Kelly Sandler. I'm going to tell you what she said about John McCain. Nobody did that because it's Washington, Chris, and that's why people don't like Washington.
And it's also
by the way, that's why the people
that's why speaking truth to the American people.
The president
as often
wears
as
a
it
lot
might.
on his sleeve. That's why a lot of people like the president still, Chris.
Anthony Scaramucci.
Great to be here.
You are helpful to
And
the show.
Kelly Sadler's going to get a great job because you're a great person.
Well, listen. Glad
I
to
don't
hear
know
that.
the other people.
We'll see
but
what
I wish
happens.
Those other people
we
will
haven't
too.
heard anything from the White House about it. We'll see if they confirm this.
good.
But I can confirm this right now. You're important on the show. You're important to the dialogue. Thank you for being with us.
I'm happy to be here.
Appreciate it. Anthony Scaramucci.
I got to make my seat a little higher next time, guys. I got to.
They don't make a seat that high, but you can have the cup.
I got to be at a little bit of an advantage. here, a little
Next,
bit.
Bill
Yankee
Clinton.
in Fenway Park.
It never ends. Bill Clinton ends nothing. He gets a redo on the Monica Lewinsky question and whether Me Too has changed his mind about anything he did. Now, here's the question. Did his answer, which we'll play for you, did he make things better or worse? And as I hope you know by now, this show is about us getting after what is right and wrong. And I can wind up on both sides of that. So follow me on Twitter and the show and tell me where you think I have it wrong, and I'll respond ahead. Not you, Anthony. You did that. Welcome back to Cuomo Primetime. It's time for the great debate. It's no cacophony of voices. We have strong voices on two sides of an issue, and then we get after it. Joining us now for more on this White House war against the NFL, we got Van Jones and David Urban. Night 2 of the show. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
All right, Brother Urban. The president disinviting the Eagles. Is this another play at dividing the country along racial
Chris,
lines at a minimum?
Come on, not even close. I know. Listen, the Eagles chose to make this a political issue. The president invited them. They could have come down. They could have stood there. They could have celebrated like all teams have done in the past. But they chose to draw a line in the sand and not come because of what this president has said before the past. Because of his political views, Chris. The Eagles chose to make this a political issue, not the president.
But why is it okay then that the president couldn't be better, couldn't elevate himself,
Chris,
couldn't remember that he's the president,
10
and in
people
front
were
of the
coming,
people's
Chris.
house, he disinvites them?
Because 10 people are coming. He pantsed the Eagles before they pantsed him.
Van Jones, is this a pantsing or is it something worse?
Look, this is completely ridiculous. First of all, let's just be very clear what happened here. The President of the United States decides to punish the entire team because some of the members didn't want to come. But he's punishing
the whole
the members
team
who
didn't
did.
want to come.
Hold on. He's punishing the entire team because some of the people didn't want to come. But the people he's punishing who didn't want to come didn't even do what he said they did because they didn't even kneel. He is so far down the rabbit hole of crazy on this. And what it comes down to is there is a resentment here against the NFL. And listen, nobody, by the way, I got to say this. Nobody was happier than me, by the way, when Philadelphia won, because Tom Shady Brady, who deflated balls and is somehow a hero, gets to play, and Colin Kaepernick, who never did anything but try to stick up for civil rights, can't even get on the field. So when Tom Shady Brady went down, and this, a lot of African Americans were very happy when Philadelphia won. And there's a racial dynamic here, a racial dimension here about the fact that Philadelphia and Trump have this beef. And but it's outrageous for him, outrageous for Trump to punish the whole team, something that nobody on the team even did.
All right, back to you, Urban, but let's get some context. First of all, to the extent that Brady is relevant here, he didn't show up to the White House. He had family issues the last time they won. The team showed up. Some of them chose not to go. They didn't get this treatment. Why the distinction? And you called it pantsing. My friend, this is why I gave you the downward look on that. These are heavy issues.
Chris,
These
I
are
get it.
issues
I
of
get
if
it,
you
Chris.
don't,
I get
if
it.
you
Listen,
don't practice patriotism the way I like it, you're bad.
No, Chris.
Son of a bitch.
No, it
Get
isn't,
out
Chris.
of the country.
Listen.
That is dangerous talk for a president in a country that's about tolerance.
Listen, I believe in the players' ability to protest, the right to protest, right? I think we need to get past the protest, make some progress. If I were the NFL Players Association, I'd be working to try to get some sort of real reforms rather than continuing the protests on the sidelines. I don't know what that gets you. Let me just say, pick up the point that Anthony made before earlier on the show. National anthem is about, about minutes, about 120 seconds, depending on who sings it. If we can't, as a nation, agree to stand and be silent and think about that.
Come on.
No, Chris,
the
listen.
flag
Stop.
is a symbol of freedom.
Hey, Chris,
Hold on, I heard
stop.
your
No,
point.
stop for a second. See this pit on my lapel here?
Yeah.
It's for the Johnny Mac
Actually,
Soldier
no,
Fund.
we got the election countdown clock in front of it, but now I see it. What is
I'm
it?
wearing a pin. So Johnny Mac Soldiers Fund. I was at West Point today with my classmates, honoring my classmate John McHugh, who was killed by a terrorist bomber. You know what his coffin was wrapped in, Chris? The American flag. People take umbrage.
God bless
They take
their
great
sacrifice. God bless them for protecting our freedoms.
Chris,
but
people
don't
take
play
great
that card.
umbrage.
That's jingoism.
No, it's not jingoism.
That's jingoism.
No, you
That's
believe
what it
patriotism is jingoism,
You are
Chris?
telling certain people.
Do you believe patriotism is jingoism?
No,
That's
of course not. But I'm saying when you pervert it, and when you say that if you're not the kind of patriot that I want you to be, that you're somehow inimical to the cause here, and that's dangerous stuff.
I think what the
Van
president's
Jones, hold on a second.
Sure.
We heard you on this one.
Okay.
Let's bounce it back.
Okay.
Van, listen. The reason I wanted to do this tonight is it ain't about football. Okay? And it's not about the flag. This started as a social protest when they started to kneel. Nobody's ever said I'm anti-flag. They said it is hard for me to honor the flag right now and honor our country when there are issues I'm so against that are against what this country is about. That's where it started. It was never a protest to the flag, but that's what Trump has made it, and his allies, like our friend on the show right now. Is that fair?
It's not fair, and I tell you, I'm a ninth-generation American, Chris. A ninth-generation American. I'm the first person in my family that was born with all my rights recognized by this government. My father was a veteran. My family members have served in this country. I don't need anybody to tell me what this flag means and what it represents. People in my family, people who look like me, have put blood in the ground, have put martyrs in the dirt in this country to have it be liberty and justice for all. And it is beyond insulting for people to lecture us about patriotism. We've done more.
Van,
No, you
had
had your chance.
Go ahead.
Listen, there is a level of patronizing, not from you, but from this White House and from others, that somehow African Americans are ungrateful, that we somehow don't know what this country is about. We have fought in every war. We have sacrificed more for that Constitution than most people. And if this man, Colin Kaepernick, can't kneel because a veteran, you're talking about veterans, it was a veteran that told them to kneel. He was just sitting on his butt, and the veteran said that was wrong. And Colin Kaepernick learned, and Colin Kaepernick tried to grow, and Colin Kaepernick tried to do what they told him to do, and he still don't have a job. And it's wrong. And if you can't say it's wrong, then there's something wrong with you.
So listen, wouldn't it be better if Colin Kaepernick were able to get the owners and get the police and get out in the community and see, right? Wouldn't it be better if all those players took all that energy and put it to progress?
Yeah, hold on. Let's get a counterpoint. Go ahead. This is, and by the way, first of all, with everything that's going on in this country right now, I like how this conversation's going. You're being reasonable, you're making your points, and I like it. Van, continue.
But here, you know, Brother Urban, as you get called on this show all the time, because we do love you and we do respect you. But one thing that has been left out of the right-wing media coverage is that Colin Kaepernick has put millions of dollars and challenged other celebrities to put millions of dollars into the neighborhoods. He's not just talking the walk, he's walking the walk. Why can't that be acknowledged and
Why don't we
celebrated?
talk about that?
I would love to talk about it, but here's the thing.
Why won't the president talk about it?
You got a president of the United States.
And listen, look, I think it's important to keep, you know, who we're talking about and who we're not. Dave, I know that you agree with a lot of what Van is saying. I know that as a veteran and somebody who respects the freedoms of this country, you know we're all about tolerance. We're all about letting people express the way that they want. That's why I'm worried about this.
But Chris, as a lawyer,
because that's
you know
not what the president's doing.
There are restrictions on speech in lots of instances, right? I'm not saying this is one of them.
And the NFL has their right to say how their employees do what they do, and they're figuring that out. But not what the president's playing at.
Listen,
it's not what he's playing at. He's making it about these guys don't respect the flag. He calls them sons of bitches. He says they shouldn't be in the country. Who is they?
Listen,
who is they that he's talking about? This is not uniting. He was supposed to be a uniter. You told me he would be a uniter during the campaign.
I never said he was a uniter. That wasn't me.
Oh, it was you. You are not easy to mistake, my friend. Head shape alone. I'll never forget who you are.
Pull the tape. I know I got a big. I'm not like Van. I'm not like a good-looking dude like Van.
You guys both have good-shaped heads. It's what's in them that I'm worried about right now. Do you believe that this is the right move? Disinvite the team, say that they're opposition, say that they're wrong, say that they're not American.
Listen, Chris, it wasn't the president who decided. The president invited the team. On May 31st, 80-plus members of the Philadelphia Eagles showed up On June 1st, it was down to a handful of people, okay? The Eagles made the choice here, not the president.
But listen, I just think I see it very, very differently. What the president is saying is that this is about the disrespect and the protesting. And the problem that you have is those players, the ones who didn't come and the ones who wanted to come, none of them kneeled in protest. So he's
I don't disagree with that point.
Because they don't like him. That's why
that's why they didn't come. They don't agree with his politics.
And on that basis, he disinvited them, even though it's not his house, it's our house, and he's supposed to represent everybody in this country. And he's supposed to represent tolerance. And I don't know why he's not doing that.
Chris, do you really think, Van, do you think if the president invited LeBron and folks to come to the White House to sit down, do you think they'd show up?
Right now, no. Look, we got LeBron James. His sound is all over the place. He's saying, as an African-American athlete, I feel alienated by this
But if he said, come, but to your point, Chris, if he said, come on in, we're going to sit down and talk about this, would they go?
Listen, I don't know if they would go, honestly. We have had conversations with some of the players. They said, if you want to talk about something serious, like criminal justice reform, which you and I agree on, and some of these issues, I think some of them would come. Listen, at some point, let me just say this. I think the President of the United States has an opportunity to turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. Disinviting people and using it as a political weapon may be short-term pain, a gain for him, but it's long-term pain for the country. But if he wants to have a conversation, don't forget, these young guys who are 23, 24 years old, every Thanksgiving they go back to neighborhoods where nothing's gotten better from either party. Neither party has made anything better in those neighborhoods. He could sit down and talk with these guys, but instead, the grandstanding is short-term gain, long-term pain.
Last words.
So Van, I would suggest, right, maybe around prison reform, you get a bunch of folks together, not around the flag. You take folks in, show what the president's doing, that he's not the devil incarnate, as many think, and he's looking to do good things for the African-American community on prison reform and other things. I think you'd be the tip of the spear on that one. You take the foot
but that's
forward,
the whole
buddy.
point.
I think
that's
Van
what the president's role is. Find the common ground. Take action
and that would be
upon
common
it.
ground. And I think Van is a person who is
but I'm saying that,
respected on both sides that could do that.
Van Jones is a good man. I watch his
good
show.
man.
It's a good
He is
show.
a good man.
But what I'm saying is the president shouldn't need a proxy to reach out to Americans to solve problems.
Because as I just asked, I said if the president put the invite out and said, LeBron, come on in.
Well, that's different. Let's see if that
He said he
happens,
wouldn't
and
go.
then we'll take the next step. In fact, we'll make it a cause right here on this show. We'll all do it together. That would be great. I'd love to have it. I would take time every night to follow it to its fruition. Let me ask you two more quick things. First one, Betsy DeVos. Let's play the sound.
Will your commission look at the role of firearms as it relates to gun violence in our schools?
That is not part of the commission's charge per se.
I see. So you're studying gun violence, but not considering the role of guns.
We're actually studying school safety and how we can ensure our students are safe at school.
Dan, if you had hair, would you pull it out over this? You're not going to look at guns, whether you want to look at who gets guns and how we control it better, or whether or not you think more guns are the solution. Certainly you can ignore the role of the weapon in this equation. How do you justify this?
Well, what she says is even worse than that. But what she says is even worse than that. She said we won't even study it.
Right.
Now, listen, that means even if a comprehensive, clear-headed study would say, guess what? None of these gun regulations make a dadgum bit of difference. Don't do them. Even if the study would validate your point of view, you aren't even willing to have the study. That gives you that's a whole different level of dysfunction at the top of our government, where you won't even want to have facts that may prove you're right. There's something wrong with that.
No, look, guys, I mean, I'll push back on this a bit. I don't think that Secretary DeVos said they're not going to look at that. I think what she did is she's going to take a look at things that are under their control, right? The gun violence is obviously a huge issue in schools. So is mental health, preparedness, mental health awareness, mental health funding, bullying. Look, there's lots of root problems that need to be studied to figure out what's happening here. As I've mentioned to you, Chris, and others, when you and I were growing up in Van, we were growing up as kids. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. Guns were abundant and plentiful. No one went to school and shot anybody. What's changed in America? Guns have become less available in America now, and violence has increased. Something has changed. Something needs to be done. Something needs to be looked at.
So why not study all of it?
And just to be clear,
I think
from a fact perspective, gentlemen, it's part of the charge
Right.
of this commission.
And that committee is designed to do
But
something
I'm saying, how
differently.
can you have a committee that studies school shootings and
why
not deal
did
with the shooting element?
No. It's worse than that. It's worse than that. Why was the commission formed in the first place?
Listen, the question
because
was
of a
posed-
shooting.
Sounds better
If
when you said it, but I said the
listen,
same thing.
If you push,
Go ahead.
the
Last
rewind,
point on
listen.
this.
If you push the question back and listen to what Senator Leahy asked her, he asked whether 18-year-olds should be able to purchase AR-15. That was the question that prompted that exchange.
Right, but we still wound up in the same place. Look,
No, well, listen,
here's the point.
She said, "Look, it's not my job; it's the
I know,
Congress's job."
but look, it's
Senator Leahy
it's a
and
hedge,
his colleagues.
and it shows that the commission isn't set up with the integrity that it should have been, especially if you're going to offer it up as a solution for the problem. Here's all I'm saying. There's a lot of common ground when it comes to making the schools safer. We know that. And if we're going to hide from the entire issue of gun violence by just looking at school shootings when they're only about 1.5% of the problem, then you at least take it very seriously. We don't seem to be doing that.
Chris, I'd say take a look at Sandy Hook Promise. Great organization.
It is a great organization.
Great organization out of Newtown.
It
Those
is.
folks,
Our government
put a lot of
should
time
be our government should be in the lead, not hiding. All right.
I
Now,
agree.
Last piece of sound. Former President Clinton made a lot of waves of the wrong kind, saying he wouldn't do anything different where Monica Lewinsky was involved, that Me Too hadn't really changed his disposition. Stephen Colbert gave him a redo on the question. Here's what he said.
Here's what I want to say. It wasn't my finest hour, but the important thing is that was a very painful thing that happened 20 years ago, and I apologize to my family, to Monica Lewinsky and her family, to the American people. I meant it then, I meant it now. I've had to live with the consequences every day since. And I still believe this Me Too movement is long overdue, necessary, and should be supported.
From both. Dave Urban, did he make it better or worse?
I made it better. Look, I mean, he got a redo. I take him at his face value. He said what he said and made it better.
Van Jones.
Look, I work with a lot of young guys who make mistakes, and the one thing we want them to say is the pain I caused, not this happened, the incident, whatever. And I think that was, I would have wanted him to say at the first time and the second time, I'm never going to stop apologizing. I will never stop apologizing to my country, to my wife, to whatever, and just own it, and then be that great example for other guys in similar situations. I think he came up way short the last time. If he were one of the young guys in one of my programs, I would still be coaching him to take more responsibility.
Van, he made it much better than the first time.
True.
Fine, but we're about progress, right? And
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
something where the pain that has been caused to others by people in his position is what we want to highlight.
Well, the question
We got
still
a little
remains,
further to go.
did he apologize personally to Monica Lewinsky?
Well,
That
he
was
had said no.
Yeah,
He
okay,
said
so
that he did
was-
it outwardly.
right.
But let me tell you something. Brother Urban, Brother Jones, you're making this show better. You're making us fulfill our mandate of helping people to get after what's right and wrong. Thank you for doing it on the second night of the show.
All right, thanks for having us, Chris.
Thanks for giving us a chance. Appreciate
All right. Ahead, we did politics. We also have to do policy. The president's latest move on trade has people very angry within his own party and the other party. We have the man who's telling him this is the right thing to do. We're very lucky to have Peter Navarro. Let's test the message. Next. All right, so this is a big deal. Is the United States spoiling to start a trade war with friends and foes? If so, we would have never really seen anything like this in the modern era. It could flip the balance of power that we've known for more than a generation. So let's break it down. I know it can seem very complex, but there's some simple points. All right, we'll do it right here on the whiteboard. All right, we have our friends, Canada, Mexico, UK, Germany, among others, where we've tried to have beneficial alliances. Now we've had traditional foes, North Korea, obviously, and China. China's really the big one. When you're looking at unfair trade practices, when you're looking at theft of intellectual property and uneven playing fields in general, they're the main malefactor of the United States. But now we have this weird thing where you have these two swapping sides. You have the United States saying, we're going to give these guys a very hard time. We're going to figure out how to make this a little bit easier. Why? Why would we do this? Well, the president says, because I'm strong, and this has been too weak for too long. Our intellectual property, our workers, where we have to deal with tariffs abroad. I'm going to fix it all, and I'm going to do it at once. Very dicey. What's the proof of that? Ironically, this plan has already achieved something unheard of right now in our country. Unity among Republicans and Democrats. They really are in big numbers united against the plan. They say this double bicep flex of these two arms of this plan is actually very weak. So the case needs to be made to you. Let's do it with somebody who knows it very well, okay? White House trade advisor Peter Navarro is here on Primetime. Sir, good to have you on the show.
Chris, you got to spend a little bit more money for a better board there. Get digital,
I like
dude.
the low tech, but you know what? This is the least of my problems, but I'll take it on. Help me with the first part.
And by the way, congratulations. The set looks great. I think your show's going to be great, so congratulations.
High praise, appreciated. Good to have you be part of it. Let's get after it on this. The idea of invoking trade measures that are negative against friends and foes at the same time. Why a good idea?
So let's start with first principles here. We have steel and aluminum tariffs that went into place for one simple reason. As President Trump has said, without steel and aluminum industries in this country, we don't have a country. And so the challenge we faced from a policy point of view is how do you do that? And the problem we had is we have about 20 countries flooding our markets with steel and about 15 flooding our markets with aluminum. So tariffs were the answer. And these tariffs are not aimed at any individual country, whether it's a strategic rival like China or an ally and friend like Canada. They're simply a defensive measure in order to bring about a strong steel and aluminum industry. And we have that, Chris. I mean, it's important to note that since those tariffs were announced, we've had a $150 million investment in Hawesville, Kentucky by Century Aluminum. We've had new plants opening in Granite City, Illinois by U.S. Steel just on Friday. We had a $1.5 billion rolling mill, aluminum rolling mill in Appalachia. Just a great achievement by this administration.
But let's test it a little bit, Peter.
Sure.
The idea of we'll make our own, and that will make up for the imbalance. You know that is a minority theory among the economic.
Imbalance, what were you referring to?
Whatever shortcoming there is because of the tariffs, whatever supply we lose, it's okay. We'll make up for it with more jobs here at home. The companies here will be revitalized. That is an ambitious proposal because you have two other effects of these tariffs. And let's just deal with the economics, then we'll get to the politics.
Sure.
One is you raise prices, they get passed along.
These are the downstream, the alleged downstream.
Well, you know, that is part of the economic theory. And the second one is they find other markets. So you do this to the Chinese, and they just sell these same properties in you know, a very transferable market to other places. They'll still make their money. So how do we?
So we don't care if China makes their money or Canada makes their money. What we care about, Chris, is simply having viable steel and aluminum industries. For the last 10 years, these industries have lost over 50,000 jobs.
Well, but then you would just invest in them directly.
They haven't earned a positive rate of return to speak of. So that's all we're trying to do here.
But why would you do it this way, right? Because you're saying this is a national security issue.
Well, the best way to do it is through tariffs. Really, I mean, it works. Let's look at the results here, Chris. We turn these two industries around in a heartbeat, and we've seen all this investment flooding. The same thing happened with solar tariffs and dishwasher. I mean, everybody's talking about price effects, and instead what we've gotten is an influx of investment. And by the way, the additional cost that you get from the tariffs on steel and aluminum in an automobile is about the cost of a luxury floor mat. It's nothing. It's a penny for a beer can. So I think the president is doing exactly the right thing on this issue, and the allies complaining.
Right.
I mean, we could go down the list and talk about how Germany's taking advantage of us, how Canada's taking advantage of us.
I understand, but from a political perspective, I mean, you can lay out the economics of it and say we think it will work out this way to our benefit, but it's a cost-benefit analysis, right? And the politics here are going to loom large. And you have the allies who aren't happy. You have a chance of retaliation by the Chinese and others, which is being suggested by all of them, which could actually create a national security issue. I don't know that you articulated one well, but now you may have one because you're doing this. And you have your own party. Let's listen to sound from them.
He's abusing the authorities that were given to him. They seem to want to punish our allies and friend our enemies.
Trade wars and dividing us from our allies makes no sense.
I am nervous about getting into trade wars.
I think it's dangerous when you go in and start picking winners and losers.
The president has very strongly held views on trade policy. I disagree with them.
Those are your people. Even Mitch McConnell, he like never disagrees with the president on anything, and they're all saying they don't like it. Where's your support?
So the President Donald J. Trump, basically is supporting American workers and the American people. That's who his constituency is. And you know what was interesting about the jobs report on Friday, Chris, is it was a complete validation of an economic policy that basically said, you know, there's millions of Americans on the sidelines by globalization that are destitute and hurt. And of the over 3 million jobs that Trump's policies have created since the first 500 days, almost 1 million of them were people who weren't in the workforce, who weren't being counted because they were so discouraged. And the president is proud of that, frankly. His tax policies, regulation policies, and trade policies are working. So this is what the president stands for, and this is what we're working towards. And, you know, the bigger thing, Chris, because I know time's short, the other thing we really should drill down on is the China issue, because the president wants to defend our technologies and intellectual property. China's taking it in 4 different ways. They steal it. They force the transfer from
and let's
American
do this.
companies.
Let's have you come back so we can drill on that, because it's not, you know, it's not a quick conversation.
Sure.
And obviously, what's going on with ZTE, their big telecom company, which is a major, you know, thief when it comes to our intellectual property, they seem like they're just getting a break from the White House. So let's drill on that again. I'll invite you back and do it because the conversation matters.
All
Peter
right, Chris,
Navarro, thank
good
you
luck
very
with the
much
show,
for taking
friend.
the opportunity. Appreciate it. Earlier in the show, I told you that this is a two-way street. We're getting after what's right and wrong. Sometimes you'll think I'm right. Sometimes you'll think I'm wrong. Well, let's start that convo tonight. You disagree with anything I've said? Get on social media. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the show. You get the floor. Next. All right, we can all be right and wrong. The problem is we're disagreeing with decency. So let's get after that right now, something I affectionately call, tell me where I'm wrong. Why? Because I work for you, so we should do this. Let's get to the tweet. Chris Cuomo, the only journalist whose questions are longer than anyone's responses. Fair criticism, I'll work on it. Next, Steve tweeted, great show. Rudy was odd. I swear to God, he should have said, forget about it, Chris. Your facial expressions were almost, but not quite, at the level of Jake Tapper. First of all, never compare my face to Jake Tapper's. He's much more handsome. And second of all, worry about the content. And VG Duffy tweeted, great show, Chris. That's not telling me where I'm wrong. Please tell me you will not be wearing the same... First of all, this tweet is from my executive producer. Her name is... I won't tell you. Figure it out yourself. All right. Those are our tweets for now. We'll do better going forward. I promise you that. We're going to go one-on-one with right and left tomorrow for you down in D.C. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, then Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. That's all for us tonight. Let's get after it again tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm John Vors, live in Los Angeles. You're watching CNN's special primary election coverage. It's 11 p.m. here on the West Coast, 2 a.m. in the East, and it could be days before final results are known from the biggest primary races here in California. Voters went to the polls in 8 states. For Democrats, it's the start of the long road to flip the House of Representatives come November's midterm elections. But the X factor in all of this is California's jungle primary system, where Democrats and Republicans compete on the same ballot, and the top 2 vote-getters, regardless of party, advance to the general election. We have a lot to get to in this coming hour. So joining us here, political analyst Bill Schneider, author of Ungovernable, How America Actually Became... Standoff, How America Became Ungovernable. Thank you, Bill. CNN's U.S. political reporter Maeve Reston, Democratic strategist Caroline Heldman, talk radio host, Trump supporter and columnist with the Orange County Register, John Phillips. I got it in. Also in New York, CNN Politics senior writer and analyst Harry Enton, and from Orange County, California, CNN's senior U.S. correspondent Keung La. And we'll start with Keung, because right now, because of this weird primary system in California, there are those 3 congressional districts which are causing a lot of concern for Democrats, including the 48th district where you are. So what's the latest?
This is a concern that National Democrats are really concerned about. They're watching this very carefully. This is the 48th district, as you pointed out, John. Dana Rohrabacher is the Republican who is the incumbent here. This is a district that Hillary Clinton won, and Democrats want to win this seat. They want to try to flip this seat, and this is one that they have targeted. Hans Kier said this is his watch party. You can see people here are milling about. But just a short time ago, he is a Democrat here who wants to unseat Rohrabacher. He came down here and he encouraged the supporters here in this Irish bar, keep drinking because it is going to be a long night. Here's what he said.
We're not going to know the final answer tonight. It's going to be coming in over probably another day. But right now we're in a solid second place.
Second place, there is another Democrat, though, running here, Harlan Ruda. He is somebody who could potentially cancel him out. If the two Democrats, because it has been such a long and ugly primary, if they cancel each other out, it is very possible that a Democrat might not make the November ballot, that it would be two Republicans who go into the 48th district here. And that would be a nightmare, according to the National Democrats, for a seat that they believe is flippable. There are two other districts the Democrats are really watching tonight, California 39 as well as California 49. These are two seats where Republicans are not running as well as Darrell Issa. They are retiring, but there's so many Democrats on the ballot, and because of this jungle primary system, John, a lot of voters just simply don't know who to vote for, or their vote is being watered down. So that is what's happening tonight. The votes coming in very, very slowly, John. We're not anticipating knowing anything about this, at least until tomorrow, perhaps even later. John?
Oh, the anticipation. Kyung, thank you. Stay with us. Maeve, to you, we are waiting these results, and these results could now take a little longer because of a printing error, and more than 100,000 people were left off the rolls, including in that 39th district where the retiring Republican has opened the way for a few minutes.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Today there were a lot of voters who showed up expecting their names to be on the roster in Los Angeles County, which is the most populous county in the state. And when they got there, their names weren't on. In that scenario, you are supposed to be handed a provisional ballot, but the county election officials were getting a lot of complaints for people saying that they weren't able to vote. So we're watching that really closely, because it could really have potentially an impact on that California 39, the district that Ed Royce is retiring in. And Cisneros in that district had made a huge play for Hispanic voters. And that piece of Los Angeles County, which is part of Royce's district, that is potentially where some of the irregularities were today. So we'll have to keep watching that, and it could make the counting process a little longer.
Yeah.
This is the capital of high-tech America. California, Silicon Valley, they can't count the ballots.
Well, that's not the first time this has happened, but just big picture here, though, Bill. We're talking about the road to the midterms goes through California for the Democrats, but what we have is a situation that there has been this huge wave of anti-Trump enthusiasm, which has brought a lot of Democrats to run for office, but that has been a blessing and a good.
That's right. The fields are very crowded, and the rules make it very confusing for voters. We don't know what's going to happen. But California is the center of the resistance movement, and in some ways it's a test, because a lot of people are saying if there is a lot of pressure from the left in the Democratic Party, progressive Democrats versus establishment Democrats, we'll see progressives. They ought to do very well here in California. Well, Dianne Feinstein won a very good victory, and she is one of the targets of a lot of the people on the left in the Democratic Party. This is kind of a testing ground for that, just like Alabama is a testing ground for pro-Trump Republicans and establishment Republicans.
Harry, to you, if we look elsewhere around the country, apart from California, what's been the big takeaway over the last couple of hours?
I would say the biggest takeaway is how well women candidates have been doing. In a number of key races, women have come out on top, especially in the Democratic side. In New Mexico, it looks like in the 1st district, the woman who won that primary is going to be the first Native American woman ever elected to the Congress if she wins in the fall, and she's heavily favored. In Iowa, the 1st and the 3rd district, women did very well there. New Jersey as well. And in the governorships, Iowa, Alabama, South Dakota, women candidates who are all favored in the fall won their nominations tonight, most of them actually on the Republican side.
And Caroline, just back to California, is it a concern that there hasn't been this sort of voter turnout, that this increase in voter turnout that many Democrats had been looking for? And also, if you look at the 39th district, the result there, you see the Republican Young spent about $700,000 on that race, while the Democrats spent millions, and not exactly the result, I guess, they were hoping for.
Well, I think it's tough to say what this means for the Democrats. Certainly, the surge that we were expecting in terms of voter turnout didn't happen. But in midterm elections, it's really difficult to predict, especially when you're going in and there's only a few candidates you know. And I will say, going into the voting booth today and seeing that there were literally, I had to turn pages many times just for one race. And in fact, when I put my ballot in, the man behind the counter said, "Oh, you did it right. Most people are not doing it right." So I think it was difficult. This was a really low energy race. For example, the governorship, only 84% of people even knew really who the top contenders were in the state of California. Should have been around 100%. So I don't know if this is the bellwether that we are waiting for, but I will say that the California system obviously needs to be reformed if it is benefiting Republicans in a way that doesn't actually represent the citizens of California.
You'd agree with that, John?
Well, there's not a lot of evidence that the natives were restless with pitchforks and torches in this election. This California primary looked a whole lot like California primaries in the past. If you look at the absentee ballots, for example, Democrats make up 45% of those who requested absentee ballots. They made up 45% of those who turned them in. Republicans made up 26% of those people who received absentee ballots and 34% of those who turned them in. So Republicans overperformed by 8 points and the Democrats were flat. I don't see signs of a big blue wave coming.
Maeve, I'm just wondering how much did the Democrat leadership not help in this when it came to like rallying around a particular candidate, especially in these districts that were so up in the air when it came to this jungle primary that they were worried about, so many Democrats cannibalizing the vote?
Well, they did, they did come into full play in the 39th district, which we've been talking a lot about, coming behind Gil Cisneros, and he was locked in a very ugly battle against another Democrat, Andy Thorburn, and it appears that the Democrats' efforts in that district, from what we've seen so far, did seem to lift his chances. Where Kyung was tonight in Dana Rohrabacher's seat, I think a lot of Democrats there, just from talking to them, would have liked some guidance from the party about which way to go, because it did end up being a tight race between Hans Kierstead and Harley Ruda, and there were also candidates who appeared on the ballot who had already dropped out today. So that was really confirmed for voters, and led to a splintering that the party maybe could have dealt with earlier on in the process.
And Bill, if we look at Rohrabacher's district, that's the Orange County area. This is an area which is changing demographically, more towards, if you look at, in theory, it should be changing towards the Democrats. And the Republicans have lost a lot of support, but the Democrats haven't picked up that support in any significant way.
Well, what we're seeing in places like Orange County is that well-educated Democrats, that used to be the heartland of the Republican Party, well-educated Republicans, are streaming out of the Republican Party. They don't like Donald Trump. Trump has created a huge education gap in American politics. He attracts a lot of lower educated voters, and he repels a lot of higher educated voters in what used to be Republican strongholds. They haven't become Democrats, but Trump is driving them out of the Republican Party.
Harry, the other race we have to watch is the governor's race. We now have a race between the Republican John Cox and the Democrat Gavin Newsom. Listen to what they said a short time ago.
Hello, California. Are we ready for a Republican governor? Yes. We put a businessman in the White House. Let's put a businessman in the governor's mansion, huh?
This is only the first half of the election calendar, but thanks to you, the halftime score is looking very promising, and the home team is winning big.
Harry, this result is a win not just for Newsom, but also for Donald Trump in the White House.
It's a huge win for Donald Trump in the White House insofar as that Donald Trump endorsed John Cox. And more than that, for the House races in the fall, Republicans were very worried if it was two Democrats who got through in the governor's race, then there would not be at the top of the ticket a reason for Republican voters to come out. And so this is something that Republicans should be very, very happy about.
John, if we look at the situation statewide, though, Republicans hold 14 out of 53 in congressional districts in California. They're not going to win the Senate because Feinstein's up against a Democrat. They barely snuck in when it came to the governor's race, and they're not going to win that. This is a state where Republicans are only competitive on a congressional level because of this weird jungle primary system. What does it say about the state of the Republican Party here in California?
Well, California is a big state. There are lots of offices that you can win even if you can't win a statewide race. Steve Poizner, who's running for insurance commissioner. Well, don't discount the impact of getting John Cox into the runoff, what impact that will have on some of these down ballot races. I have it on very good authority that Kevin McCarthy, the congressman from Bakersfield, was the one who put it out to President Trump and made it be known that he wants the endorsement coming from President to John Cox in that tweet. That was very influential in this primary. He was neck and neck with Travis Allen, neck and neck with Antonio Ghost at the time. That, I believe, pushed him over the top and got him into the top two.
Caroline, are we seeing this sort of anti-Trump wave that that many Democrats were hoping for?
We're definitely seeing that. In the state of California, Republicans are now actually the third most popular party behind Democrats and independents. That shift is since Donald Trump's election. His approval ratings in the state run negative 70%. So we're definitely seeing the enthusiasm. I think the best measure of it is the sheer volume of Democratic candidates who are running this particular election.
Blessing and a curse. Everybody stay with us because we have a lot more ahead on this big voting night in the United States, including more on California's jungle primary. We'll go deep into an idea born of good intentions, but is the system now giving voters some buyer's remorse? Also ahead, the celebration goes on without the original guests of honor. The US president picks up his feud with the National Football League players. Welcome back, everybody, watching CNN's primary election coverage. Back to our panel now. We've been talking a lot about this jungle primary system in California. We'll explain what that actually is. So, Harry, first to you. When California voters approved Proposition 14, what was that, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it was born of good intentions, but it hasn't quite worked out that way.
No, not really. You know, it was put on the ballot and passed by voters with the idea of getting more moderate candidates through. Remember, California is a state that's dominated by Democrats. But in fact, all we've seen is actual confusion because, as tonight illustrates, when you have a lot of candidates running on one side, even if that side has a majority of support, and the other side, which has less support, has fewer candidates running, that side that has fewer candidates running can, in fact, get their candidates through to the second round, even though there's less support for them overall.
So Maeve, essentially, how is the system actually meant to work? How is it meant to end the polarization? That,
well, I mean, it was meant to allow more moderate voices to rise in this state, as opposed to having, you know, the most far left candidates and the most far right candidates running. Instead, what it has done in this particular year, because there's been so much anti-Trump fervor, which brought a lot of Democratic candidates out in a lot of these congressional districts. But you ended up having so many people in the field that you had a splintering of vote, and it turned into this whole like game theory scenario here in California, where strategists were trying to figure out, you know, whether they should spend money on you know, trying to depress turnout or support for the third or fourth or fifth tier candidates in order to allow their candidate to rise into second place. And so you have someone like Gavin Newsom, for example, who put out ads that kind of signaled to Republican voters that they should be supporting Cox, the Republican.
Encouraging people to vote for the Republican.
Yeah, exactly. In order to make sure that Antonio Villaraigosa, the former Los Angeles mayor, was knocked out of the running. And so I think a lot of Democrats have walked away from this saying, you know what, the system is not working and needs some serious tweaks before we go through this again.
And Bill, it was described as a system which sounded good in political science class.
Yes,
But
I
not
teach political
necessarily-
science.
Well, did it sound
Well, to the law of unintended consequences. No matter what you do, it's going to have unintended consequences, and that's exactly what happened. It's created kind of a circus. The voters really don't understand it. All they know is, I go to the polls, I vote for the candidate I like best, and that's what they've always done, and they're going to continue to do that. It's the rules that got everything screwed up.
Caroline, if you take a look at District 39, this is Ed Royce's district, the retiring Republican, it seems to be an example of what looks to be total chaos within the Democratic Party and a lack of leadership. There were 7 Democrat candidates, 3 of whom had already spent, millions of dollars, mostly beating up on each other. And you know, the Republican walked away with $700,000 spent and is leading.
Right, and so what we've seen throughout California is that the National Party has been pretty reluctant to step in and endorse candidates. They have in certain races, but at the end of the day, you have a lot of people who are really energized by the resistance, anti-Trump sentiment, who are jumping into politics for the very first time, and so they don't have the same sort of kind of party loyalty, for example, but there's no top-down leadership saying we are supporting this particular candidate. Again, in some races, but most of these races, it's been a free-for-all, and I'm really glad that this system, you know, keeps political scientists and data scientists employed. It's good for something, but at the end of the day, it's really bad for democracy when you have 2 candidates from the same party. It diminishes our discourse. It diminishes the quality of the policy debates. So that's what we're seeing throughout the states. It's time for another position.
In District 48, Dana Rohrabacher's district, again, another example of how this system just kind of didn't work for Democrats. There were up to 8 Democrats had their names on the ballot, and at least 3 of them decided not to run, just adding to more confusion.
And their names are still on the ballot. And everything you guys are talking about up there, I sort of capture what one voter told me today. He said there were so many names on the ballot, he just got flat confused. He's an independent. He wasn't quite sure. Was he going to go with the Republican incumbent? He decided against that. He was going to go for someone else. And he found there was a Democrat that he wanted to support. He picked a Democrat. His name started with an H. Well, there are two Democrats. They happen to be the frontrunners in California 48, and their names start with H, both of them. He couldn't remember which one he voted for. Hans Kuehr said this is his election watch party, or the other competitor who is neck and neck with him, that is the anticipation, Harley Ruda. So that sort of speaks to the confusion there. The voters themselves don't exactly know who to support. So there just was too many people, according to this voter. But what we can tell you as far as what's happening here tonight, John, is that because of all of these candidates, because of how long it's taking to count everything, this candidate, Hans Kuehr, said came down and called it a night, told his supporters, we're not going to know what's going to happen until tomorrow. He's leaving the room as a solid number 2, he says. But it's still
number 2. Okay, so still in the race, I guess, at this point. But John, if we look at Dana Rohrabacher, the Republican, often referred to as Putin's favorite congressman because of his ties to Russia, you know, he was expected to actually retire before this election, but it seems that this jungle primary system has kept his hopes alive.
Well, he told people he was going to retire and then I guess changed his mind. 2 points on this primary. I don't think it was born of good intentions at all. Governor Schwarzenegger at the time needed a vote in the state legislature for a budget, and this is what Abel Maldonado, then senator, was requiring from him in exchange for that vote. He thought an open primary would allow him as a moderate Republican to win the governorship after Arnold Schwarzenegger left. The second thing is, it's pretty clear on both the Republican side and the Democratic side, more so even on the Democratic side, that the parties have lost control of the primaries. We saw this in the presidential election when everyone thought Jeb Bush was going to be the Republican nominee. And if not Jeb, then maybe Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or one of the others. They knew they didn't want Donald Trump. Donald Trump won, they had no control over that. What we saw in many of these races is that candidates who didn't have the blessing of Nancy Pelosi in the DCCC ended up doing, in some cases, better than the candidates that had their blessing and their money.
And Harry, are we seeing any evidence of that in other races around the country? That essentially, you know, the party has lost control of the primary process?
Well, I don't know if we necessarily, I've seen a lot of evidence of that. I just think the one overriding factor, I just go back to it over and over and over again, is if you're a woman or you have a name that sounds like you're a woman, you just seem to have a very big increase in your vote share if you're a Democrat. We've seen across the aisle different types of candidates winning regardless of party ideology or regardless of their connections with Nancy Pelosi.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We've got a lot more to get to. Some of you will stay, some of you will leave us for a bit, but thank you very much. We'll take a short break. When we come back, celebrating a winning team at the White House, not usually a political event, but the Philadelphia Eagles are now the focus of President Trump's latest criticism of NFL protests. And later this hour, why the White House press secretary is forced to defend her credibility, not just to journalists, but it seems to everybody else. You're watching CNN special primary election coverage. I'm John Vos in Los Angeles. First, the headlines this hour. More heartache in Hawaii as lava from the Kilauea volcano destroyed hundreds of houses early Tuesday. It's believed about 80% were vacation homes. There have been more than 12,000 tremors near the Kilauea summit since May 4. Nearly 200 people are missing after Guatemala's Fuego volcano buried entire villages. 75 people are confirmed dead. Rescue operations were delayed on Tuesday by toxic gas and clouds of burning ash. An American designer, Kate Spade, has died in an apparent suicide at her home in New York. According to police, she left a suicide note that mentions her young daughter as well as her husband. Spade began designing colorful handbags in the early 1990s, and the company grew into a multi-million-dollar brand. She was just 55 years old. The US president appears trying to reignite a controversy with racial overtones. He went ahead with a White House event that was meant to honor the Philadelphia Eagles for winning the Super Bowl. But the president tweeted this. The White House with the United States Marine Band and the United States Army Chorus honoring America. NFL, no escaping to locker rooms. The president is apparently furious with athletes who kneel during the anthem to protest social and racial bias. None of the Eagles actually kneeled during the season. Some did raise fists. He disinvited them when it appeared just a handful planned to attend. Later, Mr. Trump with the words of "God bless America." God bless. Okay, back to our panel now. Okay, back in January at the National College Football Championship, it appeared the president did not know the words to the national anthem. Have a look at this. Here he is. Everyone was singing. He was mouthing the words. At least it appeared that way. John Phillips, to you. It appeared also at the White House ceremony on Tuesday the president struggled once again with the words of the national anthem. He's had 6 months to learn them. At a minimum of respect to the national anthem, wouldn't it be you should learn the words and the lyrics?
What is it that Michael Jackson used to say? It's not the lyrics that matter, it's the beat.
But in this case, the lyrics do matter.
I think this whole controversy is a net benefit for Trump. Go back to the football season when he first started warring with the National Football League over the kneeling. What happened? Ticket sales went down. Ratings went down, not just for the regular season games, but the postseason games and even the Super Bowl. What happened? The NFL had to take a vote. They changed policy. Then they started playing games with this Eagles visit to the White House. They were trying to embarrass him, so he canceled the event.
Okay, and with that point in mind, Caroline, according to the Wall Street Journal, the Cowboys owner, Jerry Jones, said in a deposition that President Trump had told him, "This is a very winning, strong issue for me. Tell everybody, you can't win this one. This one lifts me." Did the president go to war with the Eagles and the NFL to raise supporters ahead of the primaries?
Absolutely. I mean, he's hearkening back to the cultural wars, right? That divided the country in 2016, that elevated him. He ran on an openly racist platform, I would argue, with his defining Mexicans as rapists, and, you know, all of the language that he used during the primary. We just elected the head of the birther movement after 8 years of a black president. He knows that the culture wars work, and so anytime, you know, something comes up with Russia, or he's flagging in the polls, or he wants a distraction, he just goes back and beats those drums, even if those drums have really nothing to do with what happened with the Eagles, because they weren't coming because of his stance on the kneeling. Many of them have come out and said, no, it's because of the way you treat women. It's because of your open racism during the election.
There were lots of reasons.
Right.
Okay. It now seems that the Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors will be the next teams to decline a White House invitation.
I know no matter who wins this series, no one wants to invite anyway, so it won't be Golden State or Cleveland going.
So, Bill, traditionally hosting a championship team at the White House, it's been an apolitical event. If there was any tension at all, usually the president would try to diffuse that. He would be the bigger person. This president, though, clearly wants to magnify those.
This president is an unusual figure. He is the only president I've ever heard of who governs as a divider. He got elected as a divider. His four immediate predecessors all ran as healers. Both Bushes, Obama, Bill Clinton was a new Democrat. Obama was supposed to heal the divide. They all failed. The divide is real, but Trump saw an opportunity in the divided nation and said, I'm going to exploit that opportunity. He got elected by division, and he's governing by division.
And maybe that may be good politics for Donald Trump. What's the impact on the country, though, the bigger impact?
Well, I think, you know, the real issue, as we saw in the White House briefing today, is a lot of people feel that it's not really getting discussed. You know, that it's all sort of these surface tensions, and there are questions about whether the president understands the full dimensions of this. As you pointed out, the White House clearly thinks that this is a good political issue for Trump. Otherwise, he would not keep coming back to it. But you have to wonder, in some of these incredibly competitive districts, or even in like the Philadelphia suburbs. Will people remember this in November? Will they be thinking about it? Will it continue to bother, for example, those more moderate Republican women who don't like Trump's tweets or his fights? That'll be something that we'll all be watching this fall.
Here's a tweet from the parody account Rogue POTUS staff. That awkward moment when nobody wants to go to your child's birthday party, so your embarrassed child says they want a party anyway, and demands a new party for themselves alone, then complains all day about being lonely. But your child is the President of the United States. If nothing else, cancelling the event with the Eagles, it seems consistent with Trump's behavior. The "you can't fire me because I quit."
We keep acting like there's some tiny sect of people that want people to stand for the national anthem and think it's disrespectful to take a knee or to stay in the locker room. We're talking about half the country. He's not just speaking for himself and for his own ego here. The American people, including NFL fans, people who watch the NFL games, people who are season ticket holders, they feel the exact same way that he does. So the fact that he's taking a stand on this, I think, is something that a lot of people are cheering.
Okay, not the mayor of Philadelphia, because he fired back at the president after cancelling the event. This is what he said.
When he had the opportunity to serve his country, 5 times he ducked out. When he had the opportunity to serve his country for real, his father got him out of it. And I think it's really disingenuous for him to talk about patriotism in any way, shape, or form.
Caroline?
And when this guy had the opportunity to deliver Pennsylvania for Hillary Clinton, he fell flat on
Not that's got anything to do with it.
The election is over, and there are plenty of white people who support, this idea of free speech of African Americans. Sure, there are plenty of those people. Nobody is contesting that his strategy works. The question is whether or not it is harmful for our nation and our democracy.
They're on the clock.
They're on the clock expressing freedom of speech in a way that is non-invasive. We don't get to tell oppressed minorities the proper way for them to express their political beliefs about being murdered in the streets. We don't get to do that.
If I were to express my free speech right to drop an F-bomb right now, what do you think CNN would do to me?
Well,
I'm on the clock. There are certain things you can't do when you're at work.
This illustrates a point that a student asked me about. A student once said to me, asked me, is this the most divided we've ever been as a country? And I said, young man, we did once have a civil war, and 750,000 Americans died in the Civil War. But this is certainly the most divided we've been.
Carol, Maeve, just back to that comment by the mayor of Philadelphia. If the president wants to define patriotism one way, is it fair for the mayor to define patriotism as those who serve in the military and criticize Trump?
I mean, I think, that was a very political statement that he was making there, and, you start down that road and it's going to lead to some very nasty places. But I mean, certainly this is this is a discussion that just gets more and more divisive by the day, and now we're going to start talking about everyone's military service, and that's the direction that Trump would like to drive the discussion.
As a non-military experienced guy, he never was served.
Yeah, exactly. To be fair, the president does not have the best history when it comes to Eagles.
No.
And of course, anyway, the best bit is when the Eagle actually then decides to attack the president. May explain why. Okay, on that note, we'll take a short break. We'll come back with our panel. A lot more to get to on a busy Tuesday, so thank you. Thanks for sticking around. Back in a moment. You're watching CNN.
The president and the administration applaud Senator Majority Leader McConnell and his decision to cancel the majority.
42 minutes here past 11 on the West Coast. Welcome back, everybody, watching CNN. For the second day, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders has refused to correct a statement from August that President Trump did not dictate a misleading statement for Don Jr. at his son's infamous Trump Tower meeting. Trump's lawyers now say he did dictate that statement, the exact opposite of what Sanders said last year. On Tuesday, Sarah Sanders turned on the media for pushing the issue.
I work every single day to give you accurate and up-to-date information, and I'm going to continue to do that. frankly, I think my credibility is probably higher than the media's. And I think that in large part, that's because you guys spend more of your time focused on attacking the president instead of reporting the news.
Back with our panel now for more on Sanders. Bill, you can actually hear people laughing in the briefing room when she said that. We don't have any polling on Sarah Sanders when it comes to her credibility versus the media, but we do have the numbers on the president's credibility compared to the 3 cable news networks. This comes from a Monmouth poll from March, and it found the American public trusts all 3 cable networks more than Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, what does any of this have to do with Sanders' refusal to set the record straight?
She is the president's mouthpiece. That's her job. And if people don't trust the president, they're not going to trust anything she says either. That's where she gets in trouble. She is the voice of the president.
But Maeve, why wouldn't she correct the record? Is she protecting the president?
Well, I think that, I don't think that we could fully explain her motives at this point. It was a fascinating discussion during the briefing today because she continually got pushed on that point. And for whatever reason, did not clarify, whether she got misinformation. She just kept over and over again coming back to this point that she has tried to give the best information that she can at the time.
Well, and then she can't answer these questions because they must go to the special counsel dealing with the Russia investigation.
Right, and that didn't make a lot of sense because, of course, as our Pamela Brown pointed out, she has talked about the investigation at different times. So, I mean, she might be protecting herself, possibly. We don't know, where the investigation is going, or that's been the guidance that she's gotten from the top officials inside the White House.
Yeah, and then with a totally straight face, she added this.
I work day in, day out, and I believe, frankly, with the majority of you here in the room, you all know an honest one who works extremely hard to provide you with accurate information at all times. I'm going to continue to do that, but I'm not going to engage on matters that deal with the outside counsel. Justin?
Which was astounding, given the White House history of spreading false and misleading statements and refusing to correct the record over and over and over again.
Absolutely. It is not surprising to me that Sarah Huckabee Sanders lied about being an honest person. She works for a man who, according to PolitiFact, lies on average 7 times a day. He's actually picked up his pace in 2018. It's just over 8 lies per day. So she is his mouthpiece, and she is a paid professional, for lack of a better term, liar. And she has actually shifted this position. We have never seen someone behind that podium acting the way that she does. There's always been at least some modicum of trust between the person who is the president's mouthpiece and the press. She has obliterated that simply because not only is she often not on the loop, but she's often openly dishonest with reporters in a way that it is pretty easy to fact check.
And John, for someone who speaks for the president, Sarah Sanders seems not to the president a lot because he doesn't seem to be able to answer a lot of questions when asked, especially about the Russia investigation and other issues.
Well, I would just flatly refuse to answer any questions about the outside counsel. I would refer all questions to the president's attorneys because she may very well not be in the loop of what the most up-to-date information is. That being said, I understand that the press corps only wants to talk about Russia. They don't talk about any economic data that's good for the president, anything that puts them in a positive light, and they're going to go right back to that subject pretty much nonstop. And I do believe that a lot of people out there don't have a lot of faith in the media. The media picked a side, and they sided against President Trump, and Trump voters remember that. Bill?
Trump voters remember one other thing. Even Donald Trump thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. He expected Hillary Clinton to win, and that's why his wife wasn't worried about becoming First Lady. I mean, that was a universal expectation. That was a problem in polling, among other things. But the expectations were there. Trump got his mandate, as much of a mandate as he got it because he was unexpected. He was unexpectedly elected, and that's what gave him a mandate.
May, just finally, is the problem here essentially that there's no communication structure in the White House? They have a president who says one thing one day and the next day, and you just don't know where the president stands?
I mean, I think it's all of those things. And the president obviously likes to change his mind all the time about what he's going to say. In this particular case, you have a lot of cleanup going on right now in terms of people like Rudy Giuliani going out and saying something totally different than what the White House said, a couple of months ago. And I think all of this leads to a place of confusion, which is perhaps where Donald Trump would like all of us to be. He has done, everything that he can to discredit discredit the Mueller investigation and has been successful when it comes to Republicans in his base, thinking that it's a partisan investigation. So, you know, clearly there's more and more confusion about this, and that's where he wants it to go.
30 seconds, Caroline. Is it a deliberate strategy by the White House?
I think it's definitely a deliberate strategy. We've seen it since the moment that Donald Trump got into office, that he both practices obfuscation but also practices dishonesty as a way of controlling the message and seems to be pretty shameless about it. And I'll just add that Hillary Clinton actually received more negative coverage, according to a Harvard study, during the election than Donald Trump. So the idea that the media was in for Hillary Clinton, they weren't. They were actually engaging in a lot of sexism.
Okay, and on that note, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll have a lot more on the biggest U.S. primary night of the year. Will Democrats ride a blue wave to the November midterms? Is there any sign the blue wave is coming? We'll discuss that in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody. Just gone at 11:52 here on the West Coast, and we have new CNN projections from the races in California's primary. In the 39th district, Republican Young Kim will advance to the general election in the race to replace the retiring Republican Congressman Ed Royce. We don't know who the second top finisher will be at this point. To the 48th district, Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher moves on to the midterms. The second candidate, again, yet to be determined. And to the 49th district, Darrell Iss's old district, we know at least one Democratic candidate will move to the general election. Back to our panel now very quickly. Bill, from what we've seen tonight, from all the results, I know it's early, are we looking at that blue wave?
We could be. That's in November. This is a primary. A lot of voters don't bother to vote in a primary, and they don't see exactly what's at stake. For most voters, this really isn't a vote on Donald Trump. It's a primary vote. So I wouldn't draw hasty conclusions from the results of a primary.
Maeve?
I think that Democrats would have liked to have seen much more robust turnout, particularly in California today, given how much energy there has been here at the very heart of the resistance. I mean, Donald Trump has made his war on California front and center in his administration. And, you know, if there really was going to be an enormous blue wave, a lot of people did expect it to start here in California. So tonight, I think that, you know, things are looking a little bit scarier probably for Democrats.
Okay, Caroline, what do you think? Being the Democrat on the panel?
I think it's hard to say what will happen in November. I agree with Bill, but it really illustrates the fact that it wasn't this great turnout illustrates that translating the Me Too movement and the Parkland activism and historic turnout for the women's marches into actually voting at the polls is a little more difficult, I think, than the Democratic Party might have imagined. With that said, the Democrats are still up 6% in a generic ballot, so they're still favored.
That's down from what, 16?
They're down from about 15 points. So it is waning, but they still have an advantage. And I think we need to wait until November. I think there will be very strong push anti-sentiment or anti-Trump sentiment in November. And I don't think that this is a reflection of that.
John, what I think a lot of people fail to realize is that among Republicans, Donald Trump is loved second only to Ronald Reagan. They love the guy. He's at 86%.
Yes.
And that means huge turnout and huge enthusiasm among Republicans.
I talked to a consultant who worked on one of the races in Orange County for a Republican. He said in an internal poll that they did, Donald Trump's approval rating in Orange County was 50%. So even in deep blue California, there are pockets where Donald Trump is still very popular. Turnout was nowhere near where Democrats wanted it to be in California. And I would note that there was a factor on this ballot that you're not going to spend. Antonio Villaraigosa had a shot of being the first Latino governor in modern California history. They thought that he would motivate a lot of people to go to the polls. Didn't happen.
Very quickly, on that note, Caroline, there was a lot of factors too. You know, Obamacare repeal, the immigration laws, the tax package, which affects California, hits California harder than more than so many other states. And yet we haven't seen, at least at this point, you know, people turn out because of that.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it's really just a slate of Democratic candidates, and that's who you're voting for. In California, there's an assumption that a Democrat is going to win. If you live in a Republican district, maybe the voter turnout would be slightly higher. But I don't think that voters in California actually translate this into what will happen in November, because it's not really a push against Donald Trump. It's not really a question of whether or not his repeal of the state and federal tax deduction, which definitely affects us in New Jersey and Connecticut the hardest, whether or not that will actually, you know, that's not what was on the ballot today, right?
Good point to leave it on. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being with us. It's been a very good night. We'd like to thank you for watching. Early Start is up next for our viewers in North America. For everyone else, it's the CNN Newsroom. I'm John Vos in Los Angeles. You're watching CNN.